Hello and welcome to this video, and I'm really chuffed to have an absolute legend of the British jazz world, Mr. Martin Speake. Now, I first came across Martin nearly 40 years ago as a very young jazz fan. Very young I was, very young jazz fan, um, embracing this renaissance of British jazz with people like Courtney Pine and the Loose Tubes, Django Bates, all these incredible musicians were coming through. And I remember watching the Schlitz, unfortunately named, but the Schlitz Award for jazz. It was televised on the TV. It was on a night. We all sat down as a family to watch it. And I remember these incredible people being on, and there was two fantastic groups on. Andy Shepherd was on, and Itchy Fingers, which I believe included you in that ensemble, didn't it? Back, Martin, back.
That's correct, Andy. That's so nice that you watched it. And that was that one moment of fame. Yeah, because it was an interesting time, which I'm sure we'll get into talking about a bit later. But my experience was playing with this group called Itchy Fingers, which was a saxophone quartet. Very unique, actually, and amazing writing by Mike Mower, who led it, really. Although it was supposedly democratic, it was really his band. And the others were Howard Turner, played baritone, and John Graham played the alto and soprano. An amazing penny whistle, actually, as well, in an Irish background. Fantastic. So everyone brought their own thing to the group. And I have to say, by winning that, wow, you got the album cover. Well, that's very impressive.
Well, yeah. See, I'm like a proper YouTuber, but you can see if you watch it back, I'm like going, well, how do I do this?
So yeah, what that's so interesting, that period.
So which one's you on there? You're the one with the alto, I assume. Is
you
that
can
right?
tell me, can't you? I had some hair then, but it was going, wasn't it?
I think you look better now, to be honest.
Oh, thank
I
you.
think you've got better with age.
Well, I've certainly got a little bit more intelligence with age. That experience was, I have to say, it was incredible for maybe a couple of years. We were just playing at Mike's house, and rehearsing, doing not any gigs and stuff. And then we went in for that competition, as you mentioned, Schlitz beer. Now they said, well, we're going to do this every year. They only did it the once. And we were lucky to win it. I mean, I'm against all these competitions, really, but of course, I'm 26 at that time. Yeah, let's go for it. And of course, what happens with awards, as you know, competitions, all this stuff, it's just a way of getting gigs, really. You're put in the press a lot, and that was, I can't remember whether it was Channel 4. Was it Channel 4? Was it?
I remember it being BBC Two, I think, but it could have been Channel 4.
Well,
But
so
it was an evening slot. It wasn't like they stuck it on at 1 o'clock in the morning because my mum and dad, we all sat down to watch this
wow,
program.
amazing. So yeah, prime time, whatever. So, and that was significant what you're saying there when it was on, because we thought the prize was an album recorded now, but it wasn't. It was just 5 nights in New York, and they dumped us in 5 nights in New York, gave us a hotel, and then no gigs or nothing. So we busted in Central Park, tried to hustle another gig at Sweet Basil's, which didn't work out, which I can tell you about in a second. But the biggest significance was that Joe Zawinul, who I love, and he's incredible contributor to the music, such an original concept with Weather Report and everything. I love Joe Zawinul, but he was the main judge, and he just said, "Oh, well, that's the band." So we won, and Virgin Records called us up. This is as far as I know. Called us up the next day and said, "Would you like to do an album?" So Virgin Records at that time in the 80s are ringing up a instrumental saxophone quartet, uncompromising music, very original music, and would you like to do an album? We'll give you £30,000. Now this is 40 years ago. That's a huge amount.
That's like 100 grand at least, isn't it?
Yeah, now, yeah. So, and also what was interesting about it, they didn't say you should have these people on the album. They just left us to it. And we went in the studio for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, from my point of view, but I understood it from Mike's point of view, Mike Mower's a great composer, arranger. So he wanted to broaden it out and not just have the saxophone quartet, but have the saxophone quartet as the nucleus of the album, but have other things on it. So one track is a big band track. And bizarrely, this is another story, he thought, or somebody thought, let's get McCoy Tyner on. So McCoy Tyner is on that track, bizarrely, paid him £2,000, drives up. I think he must have been playing at Ronnie Scott's at the time, or in London. Drives up, he's got this chauffeur driven from London, comes there for a couple of hours, plays a solo on a B-flat vamp on a big band track, which is more like a reggae group. He probably had no idea why he was doing it. Obviously, he was doing it for the money.
Mm.
And but we didn't need him on it. This is the point. It could have been anyone. And as much as I love McCoy, and then we had Stanley Unwin as another guest, which is probably the most interesting. I don't know whether you're old enough to know who
Oh,
Stanley
I'm
Unwin
afraid I
is.
am. Yes, I love him.
Well, people can check him out. He speaks in a kind of gobbledygook, and it's absolutely amazing. He was used on some adverts, as you
Yeah.
probably know, and on Small Faces, Ogden's Nut Gone Flake in the
He's
60s.
also in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for
That's right.
more international viewers. He's one of the professors that has been caught by Gert Frobe. This is how much I know about it.
You're
Sorry.
very well researched. I'm not going to catch you out, am I, on anything with
No,
any
no.
name? So those people were on the album, and there were saxophone quartet tracks, but there's big band tracks, and then there was more like sextet tracks with Jeremy Stacey. Who else was on it? Lawrence Cottle. Richard Cottle was producing it. His brother was playing with David Bowie at the time.
Mm.
The money was just going. I think I got about 400 or 500 quid out of that.
Yeah,
Because my
it
original
was a
idea was,
it was the wrong decision to make as well, because at that time you'd had Blue Note signed Stanley Jordan that was playing his guitar, with that fingery thing, and he that's like the 20th biggest selling jazz album in history. Magic
wow,
Touch, yeah. You got Bobby McFerrin come out, and he'd done that all vocal scatty thing that he'd done.
great.
You'd got signed, you were like four saxophones, and they should have just gone, because that was a thing at the time. Because I think a lot of the sort of maybe cheesy crimes that were committed in the name of jazz fusion in the 70s, that was being cleared out with a lot of the 80s jazz scene, I think. And I think people liked, with like Keith Jarrett's Colne concert, they liked that. They were attracted to that very simple thing. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is I can remember as a young guy watching it. Andy Shepherd came out. He's playing basically like in a style which was like then 25 years old, because he was in the sort of post Coltrane style.
Yeah,
A virtuoso musician. My jaw hit the floor when I saw him play, because I think he was doing circular breathing and all that type of stuff. Then you guys came out and did your thing, and then Zawinul came on. I remember it was 39 years later. I remember it, and
wow.
he said, he went, Andy Shepherd is a master musician, but these guys have the compositions and they have the concept, and Zawinul could see that. And I think, like you said, I remember as soon as he said that, that swung it for you. And I think he was very wise there, because Zawinul made his name by pulling him in the folk forms of Austria, where he grew up.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's wound
it.
into the music in
Yeah,
an incredible way. And the fact that you had Stanley Unwin on the album is because you were pursuing an idea which I on the channel have called the English aesthetic.
that's
And
interesting. Yeah,
and
there
I
is an English
so
touch.
there was that sort of, a British jazz musician, the sort of Tubby Hayes scenario where they're really, really good. God, they're nearly as good as Coltrane. That was Andy Shepherd, and that's not to, you know, knock Andy Shepherd down, because after that he did all sorts of incredible stuff, and I love him. But what you were doing was a British or English take on jazz. That was actually wound into what you were doing compositionally. It wasn't like American jazz, in the same way as, say, Norwegian jazz. The ECM jazz has a certain sound, and French jazz, like the Hot Club. I think the whole point with jazz is it's got legs. It can accommodate all these different influences and cultures, which I think is going to be something as we get into this conversation, that what I think is very, very important to remember.
Well, there's a lot of things you said there that are very interesting. And I just did this GB News interview last night, and they were kind of asking about jazz, saying, "Oh, isn't it American?" And of course, it was originally, and an
Mm.
African American, you could say originally. And I know you've gone into that subject a bit, but what I said was something on the lines of you saying, "Yeah, it's everywhere in the world now. It's every single country has got jazz, and they all bring their own background to it."
So
Exactly.
anybody watching this, well, they would have guessed it from my very clickbaity thumbnail that I created this morning, and I'll send it to you before I put it up, Martin. Don't worry, it's not too bad. I was, I won't say that. I had an idea for it. It was made me laugh, but I thought, well, we won't get away with it. The audience is sat here thinking, why is Andy, this jazz musician of which he speaks, what's he doing on GB News? I mean, why are you in the news? Did you play the wrong mode over an altered dominant chord? What jazz crime have
I'm
you
always
committed
doing
to
that.
be
I'm always
on?
doing that. Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? You know what? Because no one's got an idea what jazz is in these programs.
Yeah.
Or they've got a little idea of what they think it is. So it's actually good for jazz. If I can say a little bit about the music
So
here,
yeah, so if we
on all
back
these.
up, after this incredibly illustrious career, under normal circumstances, I would love to go through your career and talk about the people you've played with and all the legends you've played alongside and all the funny stories you've got of being on jazz festivals. This is what we normally love on here, wouldn't it be? I'm going to have you back to do that, Martin, without a doubt.
Great,
Is got
great.
is a non-political one. But because of your CV, you ended up with one of the most illustrious teaching positions in the UK, which was at Trinity Laban, teaching jazz at that, which is a very very respected university here in the UK, which is specializes in dance and music, I believe.
Yeah,
And so, how long have you been teaching there for?
I think it's 22 years.
So 22 years there, producing and influencing, musicians, helping them along. So what happened at Trinity Laban that's got you on the news?
I should say that also I teach at two other conservatoires and Royal Academy of Music. I've been for 35 years,
Wow.
almost at the beginning of the jazz course and Guildhall for about 18. But we get back into Trinity Laban. What's happened is that almost a year ago now, February, the principal sent an email to all staff and students. Okay, this is important. It was all staff and students promoting his BLM, Black Lives Matter diversity policy. Action plan, I think he calls it actually, action plan. And there was an email the previous year, a year before, that I'd actually started responding to because I was unhappy and disagreed with that as well. But I didn't send it. But this year, at the end of the email, he had his report in there, which I'll tell you about in a second. We were enclosing the report, BLM diversity action plan, and we're doing okay, but there's still systemic inequality. His words. I had to check. I looked it up the other day. Systemic inequality. But we're doing okay in some ways. We got 50% or nearly 50% global majority, because the term is global majority now, which I had to learn. It used to be ethnic minority. Now it's global majority, which is still evident. We got 50% global majority on the board of governors. I thought that's bizarre, and that sounds racist to me, or certainly positive discrimination. Anyway, why are you doing this? There's not 50% global majority in Britain. Anyway, he mentions that in the report, and this systemic inequality is the big thing there. So my experience of 40 years teaching for 35 in higher education and playing all over the world and through Britain, all kinds of people, different projects. I'm saying, I can't see it. Please help me out here. I can't see the inequality implied for Black musicians. And as you know, you probably read the email, I included a lot of other things, just my experience. And but I mainly said, please, let's have a discussion. Let's just have a discussion about that. And by this discussion, I meant senior staff. So I included my reply to him, principal, head of jazz, and the director of music. Okay, by the way, the last two, I have to laugh about this, they've been promoted since I've left. So for what they've done to me, they're getting promoted for it, it seems, bizarrely, from my point. Anyway, so I wanted a discussion with that handful of people. You know, he's putting that idea out there. I don't agree with it. I'm a valued member of staff. I thought I was. And that I could have a discussion with him. And he knows me. The principal knows me. I've been away with him to Korea, Seoul in Korea, for Trinity Laban as a recruitment exercise, you know, to have collaborations with other universities over there. So he knows who I am. It could easily have been, you could never have heard about this if this had easily been sorted out, just an internal discussion. And, you know, I don't agree with you, I don't agree with you, whatever. And that's the end of it. It's his college, you know, it's his institution. I'm not in charge. But I wanted to say something about it because it really disconcerted me. And this is a wider agenda, of course, which we can go into a bit later. So I replied and didn't get a response. That's February, it's nearly a year ago. I didn't get a response for 5 weeks. I have never had one from the principal himself. And meanwhile, during that period, I shared the email that I'd sent with one student, because a student and I, a third year student, were having a discussion, probably about jazz and race on those lines. I said, oh, I happen to have sent this to the principal, I'll send it to you and we can have a little discussion about it tomorrow. So I did that. We had a discussion. I didn't think any more of it. And he didn't share it with anyone. He didn't send it to anyone, to his credit, students. So it still contained, 5 people in it. But then he later told me, I found out, he later told me, I shared it, I read it out to 5 or 6 students. Didn't give it to them, refused to send it to them, but read it out on his phone, and they were irate, or one of them was irate, and went in to the head of jazz and said, I don't agree with Martin's email. I don't exactly know what he said on those lines. I don't agree with it. He's flailing around. I'm upset about this, blah, blah, blah. So instead of calling me in and acting like adults, Trinity Laban, they didn't call me and they just bypassed me. And the head of jazz went to the director of music and said, this has happened. So the director of music then sends an email to me. By the way, I just back a bit. The previous night, 9:45 at night, I know, 5 weeks after I sent the initial email, the director of music said, oh, thank you for your email. Sorry for the delay. Yeah, please come in and talk about your points because there's a lot here. We can't do it by email. I thought that's a good response. Then the next morning, that's when I get the other email. Oh, students anxious. We are temporarily halting your classes next week. And that's when it all happens. So I then spoke to the student. I said, why did you not, a student I shared it with, I said, why did you do that? He said, well, to be honest, they were criticizing you. And I thought they had it all wrong. So I said, well, these are Martin's views on this subject on this day. So I'll read this out to you. So, in a way, he was trying to not protect me, but
he was under the mistake that
truthful.
he was under the mistake that truth and logic might actually have helped in a situation where
I
you're
don't think
dealing
it
with
does.
dogmatically, ideologically, brainwashed people, which is what we're dealing with this.
Unfortunately, yeah. So I just
But I'll say that. You don't have to say that, but that is my opinion of
yeah.
this.
No, it's true. I mean,
It's like dealing with the Spanish Inquisition. So what do when they come up with something like this? They don't rationally argue it down and prove that you're wrong with their absolutely flawless moral position. What do they do to you? So what was the for you having an opinion about BLM, an American organization set up to deal with an American situation that is not the same in the UK, that then the leaders then went after raising 100 million, went and extorted that money, paying for mansions for themselves, employing their friends, supporting criminals, right? And which is why BLM are no longer mentioned in mainstream, discussions
he's
anymore,
behind the
because
times.
the BLM organ. Now, I will counter this by saying the money that was spent by BLM on the ground, where people are actually helping black people in the American community, they have done very good work. Very good work they've done with the money, but the people at the top hustled and they took that money that people had given, and they took it for themselves. And I can remember watching a video that they put up of these 3 women who were the heads of BLM, sat in front of the mansion they bought, chinking their glasses, going, "Isn't this wonderful that we've achieved all this?"
In a white neighborhood.
Yeah, and so the idea that you can't criticize BLM or criticize the ideas that are coming from that, I think is ridiculous, because this is not morally cut and dried. BLM do not occupy an absolute moral position whatsoever. And what I've tried to do is be completely fair. So it's done some brilliant things on the ground, but as an
Yeah. So Andy,
organization, the ideas of behind it, I think, are pretty corrupt. That's my opinion from looking at the facts. Anyone can go and check that. And most people won't know that because they don't follow this. They listen to
yeah.
this ideology that's out there. So that's the first thing I'd like to throw in. So what you've done is question it, isn't it? Privately question in an email this idea of systemic racism, which has been whipped up because of this BLM suddenly getting wound into British culture. Now, before we go on, how would you describe systemic racism, the systemic part? What would that be?
I actually no idea. I mean, it would be. I would say it'd be on the statute books, like apartheid, like the segregation in America, but also apartheid. South Africa is one we
Yeah.
know about. That's the way I would think about it. I don't know legally. I haven't gone into all that. I'm just
Well, the
everything's
thing is
intuitive
that
to me.
the idea of systemic racism comes from the it's the critical race theorists that emerged in the
Yeah,
late 70s. And these were lawyers, and they got it totally right. They said, if you look at an organization, if that's got any rules or laws or statutes that when you examine them and go through them, are racist towards a certain race, emphasizing a certain race, then there would be a system in place which is racist, which I wholeheartedly believe. And I believe Trinity Laban would have gone through those their rules, their applications, all this sort of stuff. They would have gone through that with a fine tooth comb to make sure there was no systemic racism there. Now, when I taught in college, I used to sit there and look at the application form that the kids had to fill in, and the second box after name and address was ethnicity, and they had to tick a box of ethnicity. And I used to think, how is this not systemic racism? Why are they actually acting the race on the application form? It can only be of one thing. It's for them to measure racially the profiles of the students in the group. So I believe there is systemic racism there. But who it's against, the jury is out.
yeah, right, okay.
I've worked in a college as well, so I have had the thing of my college coming in and saying, "Andy, we're doing some promo photos for what do you call it, the what's that thing that they have which got with all the courses in
Program,
the what's that called?"
pamphlet. What is it called?
So now we both out we're both old. We're out of teaching. We're forgetting all the terminology.
The handbook. It's not even that.
No,
I
it's not
don't know
called
what it
that,
is.
isn't it? What is it called? Anyway, put
It's
in
a
the comments
brochure
what.
of some kind.
Yeah, but you know that they say we're doing the marketing for that. Can you gather together all your black students so we can take
Oh well,
photographs of
I
them?
know this happens.
Yeah, and have you got any black female students? And if they're disabled, oh, you want the three, do you? What do I get if I get all three? Is it like
Well, you might get more funding from the
intersectional
government.
bingo?
Get more money from the government
So
or
yeah,
other organisations.
I think I'm not going to say there isn't systemic racism. I think there is there, but I think it's much more complex than people think.
Yeah.
And so the idea, which we're going to have to get into because your point really was that in the jazz world, in the jazz community, in the jazz industry, if you want to call it industry, because I don't think that's the best word always to apply to it,
No,
in
not
this
really.
in this very elitist music form, which only the very few make any money out of, right? Most people are doing it because
Yeah.
they've got rich families or some way of funding their way through it. In this genre, that we need to put even more rules in to favor black people's access into it because they're not represented enough. That was your point was simply to go, I don't know whether that's the case. They may be represented enough in certain situations. Would you say that was fair?
Well, what's enough? We've all. I mean, for me, it's just I don't care what colour anybody. I don't
No.
care anything about it. It's just I want to hear good music. But when you've got this agenda going on, it's not going to music's not going to be good. Actually, it's going to be. There's going to be there's going to be a lot of other factors, and for now it's in the extreme state. The music is the lowest consideration.
You've hit that's a very important
This
point that
is,
I
I
could
mean,
easily gloss over.
it's always been that. I mean, the fact we were a saxophone quartet in the 80s was probably a novelty. Oh, these four guys, white guys, they look, the album cover, that's all doctored behind you, with obviously some graphics of the time, but we all dressed in black, there's an image thing going on there. I probably wouldn't do anything like that now, because I'm against all this stuff. But I was in my 20s and I went along with all that stuff, and we toured the world. It was great experience for me. So everything, the image is part of it, but now it's extreme.
So when you say you're against all that stuff, I assume that politically you lean probably a little bit more to the left than the right. Is that right? If you,
Well, hold on, right? Let's get into this.
yeah,
So when I grew up, I mean, when I was a kid, late teens, early 20s, I was in the Communist Party. And now, I would be considered a far right conspiracy theorist. So this is the insanity.
yeah,
So
yeah, and that's my point. Is that you when this happened, and a lot of my left-leaning friends who were because this was a big deal when it happened, and everyone had an opinion on it. And what the shame was, it was the argument, and people were saying, Is Martin a racist or is he not a racist? Is he far right? Is he a far right fascist racist or not? That's the discussion.
Yes,
As
exactly.
soon as what they did to you, they do, you are put into that bracket.
Yeah, I
And your
deserve it.
political
I
beliefs,
deserve it. This is the thing.
yeah, yeah.
Deserve it. People don't even know what my views. I mean, I tell you, Andy, this is
That's why I'm really going into detail on this and
well.
trying
Let
to
me
lay the
tell you,
groundwork for you.
thanks so much for this discussion. It's great, and I'm so feel so liberated now. Okay, in the past, give the Communist Party as an example. Communist Party, Marxist, Leninist, radical kind of party. So my belief system would be narrow then. And then later I'd leave that when I was mid-20s. That wasn't right for me, no musicians in it. It didn't feel right. It felt dogmatic, as all parties are. All of these groups, whatever you pick. Green Party, Tories, Labour, anything. I don't want to be part of any of these. I don't want to be labelled left, right, anything. I don't want
Same here. This is
to
exactly
do what
my
I
thing.
want. And I feel really liberated now that I can take ideas from all over the place and bizarrely find myself agreeing with libertarian type Tories more than anyone in the Labour Party now, but only a couple of them. So I don't have any party allegiance. It's so freeing because I've seen, so you would say I'm an old left type. Dennis Skinner, if you don't really know who he was, or Tony Benn, very different backgrounds, but those people seem genuine, for people, honest people, totally different backgrounds. If I aligned in the past, that was what it would be, the old left.
How did you feel when Prescott died? Did you feel a
Who?
twinge when John Prescott died
I didn't
recently?
even know he was dead. No, I mean, I don't feel anything for him.
No.
No. No, I lost all touch with all that stuff, really, for years, So, no, I'm not anything. I'm not,
Oh,
apart
you
from
really?
far
Yeah,
right
yeah. I'm
conspiracy
trying to
theorist,
establish.
apparently.
Yeah.
Yes. Apparently, I'm a far right conspiracy theorist or something, or a racist, whatever, people
Now
just
the thing
come out.
is this is all we can all chat about this, and this is the big talking points that are going on in our culture at the moment, and people are on one side or another. My personality, and it might be the same as you, and it might be a jazz musician trait. My personality is just naturally contrarian. It's naturally contrarian. And what I find is once I have an opinion that I've been arguing for and it starts to win, straight away I feel myself naturally align with the other argument because for me, I actually want both arguments to be going on because I think you put your opinions in and then down the middle in that bit where you have compromise is where peace and love and happiness reside for us all, is within compromise. And I think if you're a jazz musician and you don't want to be a slave to the notes on the page, you want to be able to improvise and improvise with people that you love, because that's basically that you love in terms of what they do aesthetically for you. That is what jazz is. And you find that jazz musicians will naturally always want to push at the barriers or whatever they perceive is the limits of what the music is, which is why we hate Kenny G. He's a good musician, it's well made stuff, but there is no pushing in any part of it against this beautiful structure that jazz has created, which is designed to be pushed against, which is, I think, is an expression of that's the part that's the expression of the Afro-American experience. It's like going, we want a part of your liberal democracy where everyone's got their own voice within a system that works democratically. That is what I believe jazz is. And I think so it draws people to it that will naturally have that inclination to push against the barriers, to question what's going on, to try and have their own voice, which isn't, you a jazz musician does not have to conform to the classical idea of what a saxophone should sound like, for example. Does that make sense?
Well, there's a lot you said there, and I need to think about, reflect on that a bit. But you see, I can't really, it's very difficult to separate how people have responded to me, the jazz community, how people responded to me, and the kind of music people make. It's a very complex thing, this. Sometimes people, personality wise, are totally different from their music. Stan Getz is a classic example who is brutal in a lot of ways. I mean, mixed up like we all are in lots of ways.
Yeah.
And then has this incredibly beautiful music. Miles, in a way, it's similar. So there's a lot there. I don't. Well, look, are musicians, jazz musicians in Britain, really pushing against the boundaries? And boundaries of what? No, I mean,
No, of course they're not. This is why my channels became famous, because I said that very point. I said there's a lot of great contemporary jazz out there, but when people in my comments say all the modern jazz sounds the same, which they do, and I said, why do they say this? And I being contrarian, rather than going, oh, and I could name all these incredible players out there, but I felt that was a reflection of the public going, this doesn't quite seem the same as when I listened to Thelonious Monk, and then to go to Mingus, and then go to Paul Desmond, and then go to Jerry Mulligan. That there's a different vibe now. Everyone seems like they're having to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, and a big discussion came up, and a lot of jazz musicians contacted me, and they agreed with this. So this is why I'm here. That had come out of my study of jazz history. So I'm not saying jazz musicians do it. What I'm saying is that the spirit of jazz, if you want, is not one that would define itself within terms of identity or culture. Jazz, as soon as it was recorded in the early 20s, it just rushed out into the world, and before you knew it, you had jazz groups. By the late 1920s, there was jazz groups in every single country that heard jazz. You know,
yeah.
I did an interview with Simon Phillips, the drummer, a couple of days ago. Now, his dad was Sid Phillips, a
That's right.
brilliant, yeah. Now, Sid Phillips did the first British jazz recording in 1928.
Did he? Wow.
Yep. And the British jazz, we were chatting about this with Simon. The history of British jazz does not get discussed whatsoever, right? And
Yeah.
this is something that really does have a, this is how deep we've got to go into this.
Right.
When I interviewed Martin Taylor, he said to me that Stefan Grappelli said to him that he said Stefan said my biggest influence was Art Tatum. That was Stefan Grappelli's biggest influence. Django Reinhardt, the father of jazz guitar, one of the most iconic musicians in the history of the whole thing, he based his style on George Chisholm.
The trombone player.
Yeah, the British trombone player that used to crop up on Play Away when we were kids.
Yeah.
So this cultural history all the way through has actually not been recorded or discussed in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. No, there's loads still. There's so many things you were saying here. One is that I don't think all music sounds the same. I think in each generation, particularly now with young people at colleges, certain musicians are influential. American musicians generally are influential on those people, and that's that little pocket of musicians are the ones that get influenced by it. And there'll be somebody on every instrument. You know, at one time it was Michael Brecker, pervaded the whole thing. Probably in more recent years it'd be Chris Potter
Like
and
Chris
Mark
Potter.
Turner.
I mean, I know who you're going to say. You know, it's like
But then the more curious students, I'm talking about the young students that I've taught over the years, they don't, it's not that they bypass those people, but they look in other areas. So there is curiosity, and I suppose, I mean, against Spotify and all this stuff, but streaming, because it's destroyed musicians' income pretty much, unless you can correct me on that. But it's given the people the opportunity to hear an incredible amount of music. So I'm not sure about this thing about all music sounding the same. It's a big subject once again, which we could talk about for an hour or so. You know, the colleges which I've been in since the beginning almost, they have a good and bad side to them. And this obviously the bad side going on for me now, but I'm probably out of all of them. So, but there are good sides to it. And these young musicians, interestingly, are there just to meet other jazz musicians. That's
oh,
really the
that's
reason.
what.
They're
Yeah,
not going there particularly to study with anyone in particular.
yeah.
But the other thing about what you're saying is it's all about perception. So if certain jazz musicians are pushed by the media, same as anything, that's who people are going to hear. That's who people are going to be influenced by whatever jazz magazine it is that's got someone on the front page. You know, so years ago it was Michael Brecker, because he was everywhere. And I'm just mentioning those other saxophone players, but it'll be piano players. You know, someone signed to Blue Note, they've got a bit of publicity behind. People are going to hear about rather than a tiny little label. You know, so it's all about perception. And as I go back to it again, that some students dive a little bit deeper and have their own individual take. I mean, they all have an individual take. and some are not so swayed by Blue Note necessarily. However, you go back to my case, they all seem to have been swayed by the one dominant view, right? That I'm some kind of enemy. But deep down, I know for a fact that a lot of them are not going to agree with this scenario, but they're too scared to step out. I mean, should we get onto my thing again? So
well, just before we do, because I want the audience to now realise what the punishment you had for having an opinion about diversity and equity in the UK jazz scene. I want them to think, was that punishment, even if it was a wrong, bad thing to say, which I absolutely don't think it is that a correct punishment? And also, what I wanted to do there was create a context. Is that what Martin was talking about? Is he's a lecturer of young people trying to move into the jazz world. And if I've got a YouTube where there's a vast amount of people, and this reached the Marsalis family, that when I say all jazz sounds the same, in other words, there's created this establishment thing now, which is what you're saying is what's making it sound the same. So if you're a student and you decide to, I'm going to explore Albert Ayler, or I'm going to explore, I don't know, Johnny Hodges or something like that, which is that if I'm going to go down that route, it's going to be harder for me, but it might be the right thing to do artistically, but I might not be able to build a career because of that filter on the identity of musicians that we're perceiving. This conversation is so key to what you were teaching in the class, that the idea that you shouldn't question this with the students, aspects of this, I think is an appalling damnation of modern education that will actually, the students will not understand how the industry works. You've taught for 30 years. You're really experienced in the British jazz scene. You know it inside out, and you're trying to advise people on how this system works, and they are gagging you from talking about it because there's one aspect about it that you cannot talk about.
Yeah, and they know it's true. I mean, I don't
And
know
they
whether,
know it's true. So
I don't know
what?
whether the young ones know it's true. I have to say that because they haven't yet. Maybe they haven't tried to get loads of gigs yet at a festival when it's an all-white band. Oh, the festival's going to say you need someone black in the back. Right? They're going to say that pretty much. But the young ones might not realise that. But I know some of them do. I know some.
Don't you think it's? I mean, because I know my jazz history. Don't you think it's ironic that we were told a story that Charlie Parker, because he was not a racist, hired Red Rodney because Red Rodney was a good trumpet player and he didn't give a toss. And then when they went down south in America, they had to call him Albino Red because they couldn't have a mixed group, and we knew that was a bad thing. And when Charlie Parker was able to deflate that with some humour and the jazz way in which you get around things. That's always a story in jazz, these sort of contrarian people, and they've always got a way of taking the right side. And now we have a system where if you go to do the gig, if you've got a white guy in the band, what you're supposed to do. We call them albino reds to get them on the gig.
But it's not quite got to that stage. Or maybe it has. I don't know. I don't get any gigs, so I have no idea now. I can't get gigs for this reason. Not because I haven't got any black people in.
Well, so all right then. What was the fallout for this, and what was the fallout to you personally?
Yeah, let me just finish.
Let's get that nailed down.
I feel I need to. There hasn't been any opportunity in the mainstream yet for me totally to get the full story out up to now because of the time limits on GB News and Talk TV.
Yeah.
Sympathetic though they were, and they gave me a chance to talk. So we got up to the thing. I think we got up to this thing where the student's anxious, or I was told he was anxious. They cancelled my temporarily suspended my classes, which would have been after the weekend. I just want to go into a little bit of detail here. That's very.
So you're still getting paid, aren't you? You're still on pay.
Not now, no.
No, but you were then.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, so you get suspended because I've seen staff suspended, and it's literally I've seen them almost like marched off the college. Is that what happened to you? Were you allowed to go into college once you were
suspended? I wasn't suspended, and they knew that. They although it's the same, but it's temporarily halted.
I don't know whether it is. If you weren't suspended,
it's not legally the same.
Yeah, and so why did they not suspend you if you'd been horrendously racist in your class?
No, exactly. Why? And they threatened the disciplinary procedure. Okay, we'll do it then. And they didn't do it because they know they had to back down. They had to back. However, There's a lot of manipulation going on here. Temporarily halted my classes, and my classes were generally 3 days a week, not full days, but about half the course. And then another evening, I would see the whole course in the week. Another evening, there'll be a performance platform, and I would see all the fourth years and postgrads. You know, the 3 groups a week. It was great. I loved it. I have to say this. It's very upsetting because I loved teaching there. I loved the students. I loved the music. The fact that these young people in this really insane world are into this music that you can't hear anywhere pretty much in the mainstream is very impressive. I always say to them, they're special people. That side of them, they're beautiful, special people being into this music. However, they've let me down and betrayed me, unfortunately, from leadership of the Trinity Laban. So that initial weekend in March, they said, we're suspending your, sorry, they're temporarily halting my classes the week after. So I thought, okay. And these were group classes. And so I emailed the students over the weekend and said, look, if I come in and teach as normal, will you come? Because the Trinity Laban have said they're temporarily halting my classes because the students are anxious. And what was so interesting was the response by the students. They all wrote back and said, yeah, this is ridiculous that a student's anxious. If they don't want to come to the classes, they cannot turn up. I'm paying $9,000 a year for this, and your classes are great. Right? Yeah, we're all going to come. Pretty much all said that. Then on the Monday, they realized what the email was and all took that back. Once the email was about race, okay, they then changed their mind. However, they changed their mind with the exacerbation of the situation by Trinity Laban. So on the Monday after the weekend, Trinity Laban, head of jazz, director of music, and HR, the only people, 3 people in attendance, no members of staff, organized a meeting with the whole of the jazz students. And all of them turned up. There's 95 students, 4 years and postgrads. And the only reason I know about this is because one student at the time was still in touch with me. None have been in touch since the whole year. And he was still in touch with me because he was a student, postgrad student I played with a lot. And we did gigs up north. I even stayed at his family's house, you know. So that was a kind of close relationship. Very nice, you know, great player. And he texted me and said, they're having a meeting about your email. And I wouldn't have known this. And also, which was pretty insidious, I would say, is that at the same time, there was supposed to be a meeting with me and the other 3 fractional members of staff about performances, not about my stuff, but about performances as normal. And that got cancelled. And I said, why is that cancelled? And I was never told. And now I know why it was cancelled. That was cancelled so they could have a meeting with the students and wind them up. Bear in mind, there's one student who's got the email. So he's there. There's half a dozen who are anxious or annoyed with me because they've read the email. And all the others are just, what are we doing? We demand to see the email. So that was done deliberately. The next day, they called me in and said, the students are demanding to see the email. So we insist you send it out. You know, and we argued backwards and forth for an hour because I hadn't had any sleep. The head of jazz probably hadn't had any sleep. And we were very close friends at one time for 30 years. You know, it was very sad. That's gone. So because a job's more important or an anxious student's more important, whatever, who knows how people think. So they'd obviously wound the students up rather than containing and calming the situation and bringing me in to chat about it like adults. No, we're not going to talk about it, pretending they would. Didn't talk about it. And so they said, we insist this, we really want this we need you to agree to it going out. And in the end, I said, all right, so it just goes to the students, but please include the context, which was, it was a response to this email from the principal on BLM diversity. So include that email. And also the other context was 2 years before, and this is very interesting, I've got it in front of me. 2 years before, in June 2022, the principal would sent another email to all students and staff promoting free speech. This is just hilarious. The right to free speech is not only central to the culture of Trinity Laban, but also protected by law, which is true.
Well, it is in the UK. That's the problem. It isn't. Yeah. So he got that wrong. It's protected by law in America.
Yeah, right. But now, because of, well, we'll talk about it in a second.
It's definitely not now.
Yeah, because of the halting of the fact and all this,
Yeah.
but we'll talk about that in a sec, is of paramount importance that both respect and dignity are always afforded to colleagues and students alike, and particularly where there may be differences in opinion, belief, and views. He's saying all this in 2022. So I said, include that email from him and include the BLM diversity one, and that's the context. Of course, that doesn't make any difference to them. I only want to know my email is offensive.
The rational argument does not count in this situation. Once you get pulled into this, rational argument does not count because you're not up against a rational argument here. You're up against their moral arguments.
Yeah, I'm actually up against something called mobbing. Ian Pace wrote an incredible article mentioning me, and it's very chilling, actually, because this kind of thing has happened all over the world in totalitarian countries. Obviously, Eastern Bloc, Soviet Union, Cambodia, Nazi Germany, of course, that everyone knows most famous historically, but it's happened all over the place. And this is what's going on here. They're not troops on the streets kind of sorting this out. This is all it's all done in the mind, is it? Because that's the other issue, by the way. Huge self-censorship of people's own views. Oh, I can't have this view. I had one member of staff saying that to me on another issue.
Because from my point of view, I'm very aware that I talk about culture on my channel. I talk about aesthetics. I go deep into that, but I also am like a fool and I make jokes and I'm silly because I want those two sides. My position, and I will state it now, is I want to see both sides, and I'm not, but I will weigh against on one side when I feel like that person's the underdog. When I feel someone's the underdog, I tend to weigh down. I want to go with that. And just anyone who watches my channel will know this, and I hate to go on about it again, but I'm from a mixed race family. My mom was born in Calcutta in 1940. She had to leave India in 1946 because of the rioting, the partition. She arrived in the UK with no money whatsoever. Her father was killed in that trip because of what was going on. So she then grew up in poverty, in incredible racist situations. My mom did. I'm a white person, but because I'm very aware, being in a mixed race family, that the way racism works is what you look like. It's literally that's all it is. It's
Right.
nothing to do with
Such a
culture or
good
anything.
point.
It's racism is what you look like, basically.
Such a good point, because my point is diversity. Okay, the word diversity, where it's being used, is so shallow. Okay, so, and I said it in another interview. Okay, we could have 50% black and women, black women, black and women at Trinity Laban, staff and students, but they're all from the southeast of England. They're all middle class.
Yeah.
It's not diversity.
No, of course it is.
Just about on the incredible thing that somebody said to me. This a supporter of me, an academic. She wrote a letter. She wrote a letter to Trinity Laban, and she's a mother of the next student. And she wrote this supportive email, and she's mixed. She said, "I'm mixed race, but not that should really matter." Okay. Yeah. And then, so she said, one of her sons said, "Well, one's black and the other one's pretty much white." You said, "Oh my God, I wish I was more black like my brother." This is the insanity of it all now. That's to get more gigs, whatever, or be more accepted, or whatever.
I mean, if anyone's out there thinking that this should not be discussed, right? And I truly believe if we discuss this, I'm taking a contrarian position, right? And that's risking it because I worry about my channel. I worry about people coming on here who subscribe and then going, "Oh, I didn't know Andy was like a far right racist." And this is why I'm trying to get my position out here, is that I've got people in my family, very close relatives, that experience racism on a daily basis. And they come to me and say, "You can't believe what I got told yesterday. I was told to get out of the country." Like, that's still going on. There's racists out there. But the thing is that when they tell me about this, it's not so much the white people who are being the racists. It's not white people that are being the racists. They are sometimes, but coming from a mixed race family, what I'm very aware of is racism is a thing that everybody does. And in a country that's predominantly white, the racism will be white against black people, and it has been historically. But all around the world,
Yeah.
everyone's racist against everybody else. And so when we get into these diversity and equity policies, which are based upon this concept that there is a white supremacy, and that because everything is culturally constructed, this white supremacy control a meta narrative which maintains their position, and that is almost like a ghost in the machine that goes through absolutely everything. So you might not see that racism there, but it's there almost like the spirit of white supremacy. So you might have gone through a university and got rid of every single law and rule and blah blah blah, every single one, but whilst there's white people there, they're walking around with this very specific white racism against black people, which is the only racism that exists. And so you have to counter that by fighting against it like a Marxist would fight against, the bourgeoisie, because it's an application of Marxism, swapping class for identity. So now rather than the rich and the poor, we now have the different racial hierarchy. And once you accept that that's the truth, even with all the massive logical faults in that argument, even though you're arguing for essentialism, you're saying that this thing just exists like a spirit. Even though you're arguing that white people have something in them, that this idea that they're devils, the white devils, and I've gone right into this. Even though that has to be there, right? Once you commit to that, it's not about your argument being put down because you believe you have an absolute moral position. That's what it is. Once you've got this absolute moral position, so anybody who's against what we're saying is watching this, they will be going. It's almost like someone going, "Oh, they got this. The devil talking." If it sounds rational what they're saying or logical, don't listen to it because this is what they do. It's a far right talking point. The far right have a way of getting and wheedling this in by telling you things that seem reasonable. That is the reaction you're going to get through that. And the establishment, this has infiltrated the establishment. How? Through bloody universities like you taught at. Because that upper middle class educated elite are the ones who control and run everything. And so we have a situation now, but the real political situation is normal working class people that live surrounded by mixed race people and have friends who are mixed raced and black and they live in that world, but also there's lots of crime and there's lots of things going on. They're not listened to. They're told that no one's going to look after them because they're white. If they do anything or protest, they get called far right. This is what is going on. It's not the left versus right. It is literally the rich versus the poor.
Well,
And so you're not gonna
yeah,
you would not get cancelled in the streets of Luton or in the streets of in Tower Hamlets or anywhere you went. You would not get cancelled for saying that by anybody. It's only going to happen in an elite institution like Trinity Laban because it's
yeah.
been
Well,
infiltrated by an ideology, and this is evidence that this ideology is absolute. So as soon as you even question it, not say it's wrong, but just question it, it's like bloody Harry Potter, when they put that, court case behind him and they have to, when the wizard has to bring Harry Potter in, or you would have got kicked out of the wizarding world. That whole Harry Potter episode is a lampoon of the modern educational structure.
I don't know the Harry Potter
Oh,
episode.
you see, if
No,
when I used to teach, all my points were explained through Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and Harry Potter. They were
well,
always my touch points for my
I
students. You
understand
see,
all of those programs, all those films are showing us, as all Hollywood films do, they show us what's going on
yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
It's predictive programming, in all those films, of course, and they're showing us very overtly what's going on. So that there's a lot there as well now.
But
So,
before we get into it, 'cause I really want so now people have got the background that I'm coming in hard on this because it really annoys me, and I'm not going to play the game of trying to tiptoe through this and go, well, it's just my opinion, and I've got free speech, and I'm allowed to say what I say. No, I think from my background that they are the racists, and I believe this to be racist. I believe it's working against black people, it's working against Asian people. That
yeah,
is what I believe. That's what my lived experience, my phenomenological lived experience, which they think is important. That is my experience. The racism that I'm aware of, because I've never had any. But my family hasn't. I've seen it and I have worked out what it is. And my family brought me up in a certain way. And if you don't judge someone based upon the colour of their skin, it
Yeah,
was that
I'm the same.
simple. I
I'm
got
the
told
same.
off if I ever said anything about any race. My mum and dad would tell me off. I'd get, a, 70s, I'd get a hit round the head. If
Yeah,
I said anything, oh, all black
I,
people are good at running. If I'd have said something like that, why are all the black people good at running in the Olympics, mom? Bang, round the head. Don't you say that. That's how I was brought up.
interesting.
I'm
Yeah.
getting
Okay.
I'm getting angry, Martin. It's your show, and I'm getting really angry by it. And what really annoys me is
But it's
the
your show, isn't it?
it's the fallout. Could you
Yeah.
explain
Okay.
your punishment
Let's
for
remember
being a
some of those
heretic,
points.
for being an identity heretic? What's your punishment? What have
Let's
you
remember.
lost?
Let's remember some of those points you made. First of all, in a way, I was brought up the same way as you. I wouldn't get it. But I was just brought up by a mother. My father died before I was 3, so I don't remember him. So that's an interesting thing. And she took me to hear black music quite a young age. You know, she took me to hear Ella Fitzgerald and Oscar Peterson. It was just not normal for me to have this kind of music in the house, and Frank Sinatra and other stuff. And they're like her heroes, Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of racism when I was a kid. Okay. So I'm about 10 years older than you, probably. I'm 66. I was born in 1958. So, and I got arrested for protesting against racism because and you can look this one up. This is quite a notorious rally through Wood Green. I grew up in East Barnet. That's 2 or 3 miles from Wood Green. Sort of my area, really. And the National Front, which was quite big at the time, organised a rally through Wood Green, which actually then was quite multicultural as well, Wood Green.
Mm.
And so I went with a friend actually to protest against these racists. I don't know how many, 3,000, I can't remember. I think maybe the counter rally, and by the way, Jeremy Corbyn, who I wouldn't have known at the time, was part of that. So there's this big anti-racist counter rally to prevent them getting to their destination. As far as I know, I don't even remember because I got arrested before it finished. I looked it up and I think we prevented them getting to their destination. It was the idea. But it was not nice. It was violent, and not that I was violent, but the police were protecting the rally. This is my experience as a teenager of racist organisations walking through London and the police protecting them. And I got arrested protesting against racism. That's just a little bit of background. That's why this stuff is so nonsensical to me now. It's like, but old racists, old anti-racists like me or you, now we're racist. I mean,
Yeah, because there is once critical race theory came in and intersectionality, and the ideologically got flipped. So and this goes back to sort of in America, you always had people like, you had Martin Luther King and you had Malcolm X. And then before that, you had William Du Bois and you had Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey is pretty much like a black fascist. He believed in a separate state for black people. White people wouldn't be allowed to go in, blah, blah, blah. He was anti-Semitic and all this type of thing. And it's always been like this. And all the way through, you always see disparate groups joining forces. I mean, the actual proper far right, the Nick Griffin far right in the UK, are sat down with the Islamo-fascists at the moment because they hate the Jews. They're together. Together, and so the hard left that are supporting that side are also they're also supporting something that's been supported by the actual far right in the UK, and you can't call this out. My point has been with this that this is racist. What's happened to you and what they're trying to implement is racist. And I really want this channel for someone to come on this video is by the end of this to see, oh my God, they are using social force, cultural force to stop the argument, not rational. So just we're still not there. Tell us what's happened to you
let me talk about it. There's a lot of stuff. So where are we up to? So the students, first of all, I emailed the students that initial weekend in March. The students anxious, and they said, "Wow, that's ridiculous." However, then they found out about the email. I told you about the secret meeting that was called, and so then oh, no, we're going to switch our mind. It's fine to be anxious if it's about race, you know. It's fine to be anxious, poor student, whatever. I don't know. I'm not, you know, I don't know what they thought, but on those lines. However, they're getting led by the college, by the adults, Trinity Laban.
The colleges have
Hold,
lawyers. When
hold
this
on.
happens, they have lawyers. They go
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
lawyers, and the lawyers come up with the argument, and they will go to say, "Don't do it on because he'll win if you do it on the anxiety because of free speech." He's going to argue that what you've got to go is go to this.
No,
I,
but I
I,
don't think I don't think all the time they were led by, and they are led by the law, because there have been some real knee-jerk kind of reactions. But anyway, so originally they said, and it's still public on Instagram, we are in awe of our students. So they're in awe of the students' behaviour in not turning up. Okay,
yeah,
so that's one thing. That's that first week. So bear in mind, I'm going to recap here that Monday there was a meeting with all the students with nobody else invited. No, we didn't know about it. I mean, I could have been invited, you know, and other members of staff, and we could have even contained it then. But no, they don't want to contain it. My view is they want to be, and if I backtrack in a minute, tell you some other things. They want to be the most anti-racist conservative.
of course they do. Yeah,
because Andy, in 2020 or 2021, I'm not sure the exact date, Black Lives in Music, right, was formed. And Trinity Laban make a really big deal, and it's still on their website.
Black Lives in Music.
Yeah, have you not gone
Blim, Blim.
Do you know them? Yeah.
No,
okay.
I thought of,
Andy,
you know, when you smoke a joint and then a little bit of the resin's too hot and it drops on your shirt and you get a little black
is that called a
mark.
blim?
That's called a blim, yeah.
No idea. Okay, well that's very interesting. Okay, so yeah, well you're the researcher. Have a look into that organisation.
I will. Yeah, I've never heard of
Black Lives
this.
in Music formed 2020, 2021. I don't know much about it, right? But you can look it up. But the important thing is, I think it's quite a big part of my case, to be honest. My issue is that they're collaborating with Trinity Laban and saying we want to be the most. They're the first collaboration with a music conservatory, I think. But they're collaborating with everyone. They've got massive funding, public, of course.
Of course I have.
And
that's what this is really about, but we'll get onto that towards the end.
And certain representatives from Trinity Laban, and you can look it up and you can see who's on the poster, you know, are representatives there for BLIM. I mean, my feeling, and I'm not going to be able to prove this at all, but it sounds like it, that they're writing the script for the principal. You know, that's what, because he's out of his depth. I think he's out of his depth with this subject matter. First of all, of jazz. He's not a jazz musician. And then jazz and race. And also the things, yeah, that I'm saying, I just feel they're a bit out of their depth. So he's getting, I think he's getting their advice. It's pretty logical that they would be getting the advice. Black Lives in Music is collaborating with them. The head of Black Lives in Music is on the board of governors of Trinity Laban. I mean, surely there's something going on here. Okay, so I'm putting you in the picture there, and there are other things that I might put you in the picture with in a minute, but related to that. So back to the present, or back to a year ago, they have the secret meeting. I'm calling it a secret meeting because I wasn't invited. No one was invited, apart from the two members of staff and HR. Well, HR are there. Why? Because of the legality of it? Who knows? The next day they called me in, and that's when they said, we insist you send the email out. And eventually I agreed, as I've just told you, but include the two emails, the free speech email from the principal and the BLM diversity email that I was responding to. Blah, blah, blah. Then I would say 2 days later, that's it, the storm. Shit hits the fan. And a student, as far as I know, the postgrad student started up the change.org petition against me, and people signed it. And then I can't remember what I said this earlier, an ex-student of 10 years before set up the change.org petition in my favour. So that was all going on.
Yeah, I signed that one.
And then
I signed the first one first by accident. I'm sorry about that, but I did sign. No, that's not true. That's not true. That's a joke. Sorry.
No, you're contrarian. You take all sides. No, so they were obviously influential. And then, as far as I know, because I don't really use social media, I've started using Twitter, X now, but I don't use Facebook or any of those things. But
that's another point for making you far right if you use Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
X.
Of course. Yeah, I don't support Elon Musk, but anyway, that's a whole other story. So a couple of days later, those petitions go out, and then it all goes on social media, and people were diving in. People showed me stuff, and it was absolutely
That's when
horrendous.
I saw it.
It's just the lies. I mean, apart from just my email, and you can say what you want about that, but just lies about me personally. So there's all this going on, and then it got really stressful, and the college were not supporting me in any way. I feel never supported me anyway. But the student, we're all our students. The week after, they call a town hall meeting. You might not know about this one. This is, well, they call it town hall. I think it's an American term, but it's not literally in the town hall, and it's not public. This is 200 people. This is Laban. So people from Laban, which is the dance college, which is the collaboration, but it's like a quarter mile up the road in Deptford. And it was held there because that's the biggest room, theatre, as far as I know. And so there's a meeting about me there. This is 200 people. Now, this is everyone's invited, all staff and all students invited.
And when did they burn the effigy of you? Was it this meeting that they burned?
Well,
it's
mean,
just
you're laughing.
it's not. That's basically what it is, isn't it?
No, you're laughing, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, they're not there to discuss it. They're there to make sure everybody's singing from the same ideological hymn sheet. Well, literally,
you are totally right, Andy. And this is so let me finish with this. So, I have support at Trinity Laban from maybe a couple of people, a couple of musicians, both who've now left. And one of these musicians went to the meeting on my behalf. She was still teaching there, so she went on my behalf. She's supportive of me, and went, and she said, "You were thrown under the bus, totally thrown under the bus," and took her own minutes, half dozen minutes. But she said to me, I came out shaking. And she's not even me, you know, because she felt she was the only one saying anything in my favor. So yeah, this is like whatever.
But you know, from my end of it, not knowing you at the time and seeing the reaction across the board, the people that are on the left, that I know that are on the left, their basic position was this: Martin should not have put that email out, and he should be clever enough to know not to put that email out. In other words, I took it that we know Martin. He's not a racist. He's a decent bloke. I've known him for years. We've all worked with him, and I like him. But he was silly to put that email out. And I'm sure when you wrote that email, you sat with your finger going, "Shall I send or not?"
Because I didn't send it. I did not pass it.
Yeah. When you sent it, just replied to your boss at that point. You didn't.
The original one.
Yeah, the original one.
No, that's probably true as well. That's why I say I'm naive.
Yeah.
That's an aspect of me that's naive, because I'm a very open person.
Yeah.
And I expect people to be open like I am, but they're not. The majority of people are not. And I'm not saying I'm an incredible person. I'm just like simple in a way. I'm like straightforward. Everyone knows I'm very straightforward, direct, say what I think. And people should be able to do that. And there are a handful of people who do that. But most
people don't know about this until they hit it. They don't know about it until they go. You can go through life acting completely normal. You'll be in a class where I would say, if it was like my college, a good 3/4 of them do not subscribe to this ideology, but they're wise enough to shut up when it kicks off.
Well, that's such a good point, Andy. This is the whole thing. But where do you draw the line? And I draw it in different places from most other people.
Yeah.
Where they draw the line when the state comes from their kids, because their kids have posted something on social media, you know, and they're going to get arrested for it. This is going on, by the way. I don't know whether you know that. People are getting arrested for posting tweets. People getting challenged for follow, and maybe even arrested, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I need to research that bit, for who they follow. I think this is in the news, actually. Who they're following on X. You know, people don't realize that it's not the same as Nazi Germany. It's not the same tactics, because they don't need the troops on the street, because everyone is self-censoring. You just give me examples.
The other thing is that if you have more status and you're more part of the establishment, the higher up you go, the more you can have an opinion against this, which is why Elon Musk, clunky and awful as he is, and it really is, and I think it's clunky and wrong, and he didn't say the thing that's true, but he has absolute power at the top of this establishment, so he can do it. But normal working class people, if they dare to put something up on Facebook, they're probably going to have the police around and be stuck in prison for 2 years. And in some cases, that has happened to people who were just filming the rioting, for example, they just filmed it and then went, "Oh my God, there was a riot," and they put it out.
Yeah.
Right? People went to prison for holding a placard up that had political things on there, and then when the police pushed them, they pushed back. And they got arrested for that. This is Peter Lynch, who then killed himself once he was in prison. Because you've got to understand, once you're in prison and you'll be labelled as a racist, your time is you're not going to have a great time whatsoever. It's not much like you're going to be sat in your cell for 2 years. You're going to have to try and survive. The funniest one I heard was these two gay blokes playing bingo. They got really drunk. They come out the bingo. They walk along and they walk into a far right riot. All right. And they go up to the police and they go, "What's going on?" And the police sets their dog on the one guy, and the boyfriend goes, "What the hell are you doing?" Fights the police, can set his dog on. Both gone to prison. And these gay guys are there and they're interview going, "I hate the far right. I hate them." Because they're gay guys. They've had all this prejudice against them all their life. They were protecting themselves against a dog being set on them. But because they fought the police back, they went to prison. This is all true. You could go and look it up on there, and I'm sure.
Well, just talk about the grooming gangs and the 13-year-old getting arrested for being drunk. They're all raping her. The girl got arrested. I mean, this is horrendous. What's going on?
Well, the thing is that
Should we
only 2 months ago, I had to shut down my Facebook, which I couldn't shut it down. You can't shut it down. So in the end, the 4,000 followers that I'd built up through my YouTube, I had to delete them all. Take me 3 days, and now my Facebook's useless to me. I had to delete every single band I was in, and I had to fall out with a number of musicians because I had said that the grooming gangs were real. And this was only a few months ago, and I was told, I was said that's a far right conspiracy that's made up of the far right just to bash immigrants. I was
Okay, let
told
me
that,
just
and
come in
that
on
by
that.
people who said, "Well, they are no longer willing to associate with me." And I thought, if that's the situation with the music industry, that I've got to look at the bands I'm in, and if someone's got a different political thing to me, that I've got to watch what I say because they won't want to be associated with my views because I'd stated two things. I said in two posts on Facebook. The first one was, I don't think everybody that was rioting was far right. I think some of them are annoyed about the grooming gangs. And then I got told the grooming gangs aren't real. And the other one was saying, I don't think some of these people should have been sent to prison for what they did. They should have got community service. Those are the two things I said. And I am now no longer. And when at the time I announced it, I was happy to make that. So it's nowhere near what's happened to you, nowhere near, and it's my choice to pull out of it because I am not going to have somebody in a band who's a bit left. Now, I've got friends whose bands are left wing, and they argue with me, but then they put their arm around me because they're my mate, because because they
It's
judge
like the
me as
old days.
me,
Like the old days.
but a couple of people weren't willing to do that. One of them's back
Okay,
down.
so back to my stuff
Yeah.
because it's related to what you're saying, and I'm giving you a timeline here. The week after the two meetings, I said there was a town hall meeting. This is the middle of March, 19th or something. I think it was. Town hall meeting about me. One colleague who supports me goes. Nobody else stands up and talks. Even just don't even say, "This is a bit harsh, isn't it?" They're saying a bizarre statement actually. Jazz belongs. This is the principal who knows nothing about music. Jazz belongs to the African American community. That's a bizarre thing to say in Greenwich. Right, there's no African American in Greenwich. That's related to what we talked about earlier. Jazz is everywhere. It's different everywhere. So
But if you logically follow what he says, it's ridiculous. And
yeah.
someone who is academically supposed to have that academic ability to be head of that, to state something which you can just shoot down, because basically what he's saying is nobody should be being included in this
Well,
music.
he did after that. He said, that doesn't mean we can't play it, but you need to really respect it. Okay.
Respects what?
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so that's what I'm saying is out of his depth. They're out of their depth talking about this music, which I know much more about. I've been teaching it and playing it for 40 years.
Yeah.
Right. Give me some credit. Obviously, not giving me any credit. So then I go on sick leave, and Free Speech Union and Doyle Clayton, the solicitor they hired, have been absolutely fantastic.
Thank God for
Yeah,
organisations like that.
I'd probably be dead. So isolated, horrendous attacks on me. Friends of 40 years not even calling me.
So you don't end up just losing your job there. right? You don't end up losing all your friends. You also, what happens to the bands? Because obviously you're playing bands, you're signed to
Right,
record
Andy,
labels.
Andy, can I come in?
Yeah.
I just want to say something, and I hope you don't mind me saying this.
No, it's your show. I don't. I know it doesn't seem like that, but it is your show. I just get so fired
Is
up by
there
it.
interference now?
No, not on my end. It's
No,
all
I've got
good.
it in my end. Oh, it's gone. Right. Okay. So no, I'm just finding it hard to when you keep diving in. I find it
I will
hard
stop now and let you
to
talk.
stay
I
with
keep
it.
saying that to me, then I get so wound up. I have to get involved. It's
No, I know you're kind of
I'm like
emotional
a little
like
Jack
me.
Russell.
Maybe you're an Aries like me. Are you an Aries?
Well, that is. I'm on the cusp of Taurus and Aries.
Right. Well, this
21st of April. I'm yes.
okay. That's part of it. So we're both fiery on me. Truth seekers. We're both emotional truth seekers, I think. So yeah. So all of this stuff going on, it's very heavy for me. I can't. I don't think anyone else can quite imagine this happening to them, and they're making sure it doesn't happen to them. You know, by not speaking their truth. And so I'm some huge enemy of a lot of people. I go on sick leave. I've got nothing. You know, that's the end of everything. And the knock-on effect was, okay, I had like 3 or 4 gigs in the book. That was all. The venues wrote to me and said, "We're cancelling your gig because we don't agree with your email." I said, "Okay, well, I'm not coming to do a speech, so I'm just coming to play music." "No, we're not coming the gig on." And I said, "Well, what do you disagree with?" This was the Caramel Club in Wood Green. "What do you agree? What do you disagree with?" "No, we don't agree with your email. We're cancelling the gig." And no one ever has said in any detail or nuance what the problem is. Okay. And I said, "Okay, how did you get my email?" "Oh, some musicians who play here as well send it to us." That's the sad thing. This is the very sad thing. The musicians, oh yeah, civil rights in America in the 60s. Yeah, we're really in favor of that. But not now from this guy here. How dare he say all this stuff? And so musicians want to destroy me. It's shocking. You know, a certain amount of musicians want to destroy me, probably because they want to get the next gig for themselves. And another musician being out of the picture is good for them, right? So, they're not all musicians are like this, I'm going to say that. But a lot of musicians I've realized will do anything for the next gig.
Yeah,
It's
we
shocking.
all do, don't we? I mean, if
No, I don't. I
no,
don't. I
I'm
don't.
picking this up with you. When I first talked to you, when we had a conversation quickly yesterday, you're a person who has actual moral positions, don't
Yeah,
you?
I'm not going to.
You wouldn't have. I don't think you'd be involved in certain commercial organisations in terms of your music. Wouldn't want your music represented on, say, advertising for things you don't agree with.
Yeah.
You see, I don't care. They can do anything they want with me. I'm just got no morals at all when it comes to stuff like that, you
Well,
know.
you
But
have got some. Okay, so I'll get back to it again. So,
I'm being facetious. When it comes to this, this winds me up because I
yeah.
don't like
So,
race. I don't like racism. That is why I don't
neither
like
do I.
racism.
So, so the venues cancelled. There's 2 or 3 venues. One venue in Greenwich, Oliver's Jazz Bus, which is one I played at years
Mm.
and years, and the students frequent it. So he said, "We've got to cancel your gig." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the students said they will boycott my venue if you play here." This is Trinity Laban students in Greenwich. So there's that. So what did I? 3 or 4 gigs all got cancelled. Leicester Jazz House, bizarrely, said, "We're cancelling the gig." After they signed the contract, I said, "Can I get paid cash?" After all the stuff was out, they said, "Yeah, it's fine. We're going to keep the gig on." Yeah, I said, "Can I get paid me cash?" Yeah, the gig's on. Blah blah blah. And then they changed their mind. That was what was interesting. Even though the stuff was out there, they said, "No, we're going to cancel it, but we'll pay you." That's even more bizarre. So, quartet musicians who will play with me. There are some musicians who will play with. There's a lot more now. I'm building up a whole roster of musicians who are supportive and will play with. And so they paid it. They paid us. But I know there was dissent about that
Mm.
on that in that venue.
I got to be honest. I've been paid many a time to not play jazz. So
So there's now to their credit, 606 Club in London kept the gig on.
oh yeah.
And then somebody else in my band, just to show how far-reaching this, teaches at Trinity Laban. And the student said to him, "Well, I saw you playing with Martin Speak. I don't want the remaining lessons with you."
Oh
Okay.
my God.
Oh yeah. Let me go
This
further. Let me go further.
the taint.
Then a friend of mine who has a band, he was in Gateshead at the time. lived up there, and he's a drummer, a great drummer, and played. They had a quartet, you know, so he takes some of my tunes to rehearsal, and they say, "No, we're not playing Martin Speake's tunes." What? He didn't know anything that was going on. I said, "Why not?" He said, "Haven't you looked online? He's racist, you know." So that, see the knock-on effect. It's through every aspect of my life.
Disgusting.
And then the other conservatoires said, "No, the students are anxious because your email's out there. They don't want lessons with you." They're right. They can just, they're customers. They can just change teachers whenever they want, apparently. And in the old days, as a colleague at Trinity Laban in the classical department, who have been more supportive, actually, more than supportive, I've got a few friends there, said, "Well, in the old days, he used to be head of keyboard. Yeah, so a student has a problem with a teacher, wants to change. Okay, bring the student in, the teacher in, with the head of the course, and talk about it. It's got to be a very strong reason why you change teachers, not because you're anxious because someone's got a different opinion to you." So that, but now that's gone. Students are customers. Everyone knows this. I've been told that. Students are customers, and they control everything. They decide everything. So that's why Trinity Laban principle says we're in awe of our students. Okay. So further to the ramifications of it, absolutely no work at all. So I was lucky that I was on a fractional post at Trinity Laban because I was getting paid. It's a 0.5 job that's never gone up in years, the finance. Not great money, but it helps me survive. And I was on sick leave for 5 months, getting paid, doing nothing, you know, trying to keep myself going, practicing a bit, composing, which is good, meeting friends who are supportive, you know, trying to keep healthy. And then Trinity Laban said, "We want you to come back." This is a pretense of wanting me to come back. They don't really. We're going to try and make it easy for you. So I went in and I was really positive. I thought, wow, maybe they do actually mean it. And so they scheduled all my classes as normal. September, new term starts. And 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think it's going to be my classes, all different kinds of classes, schedules. I go in 100% boycott. All the students are there. They're all in the building. And sometimes I walk down the corridor and they would look the other way or look on their phone. Some would grudgingly say hello. Others would look me in the eye and not say hello. Very impressive because they feel so strong with the hive mind, with the group. But individually, they are scared, unfortunately. They're very, very scared to step out. Okay. So I went in for 5 weeks, huge boycott, people kind of laughing at me in the courtyard, and the college, Trinity Laban, pretending to support me, but actually really supporting the students. I know they support the students. I'm talking about the main players. I'm not talking about every single member of staff who doesn't say anything about, none of them say anything about anything. You know, they just want to keep their job. And also, you know, people dive straight into my job. Now, in the old days, Andy, because you're also old enough to know this term, people would have been called scabs, okay? In the old trade union movement, which has been hijacked now, trade unions, it's all hijacked by woke mentality, most of it, I think. In the old days, someone going in and stealing your work when you've got a dispute with them over something like this, that would be a scab. But immediately people just dive in because, like I said earlier, musicians, most musicians, not every single musician, want their next gig. They want the next gig, and the next gig is, oh, great, Martin's teaching work has gone. We can lap that up. So there've been some musicians, I don't know who's doing it, I can guess. That those musicians, they're not standing up and saying, Martin's like, he's got no income now, and all he said is this. And no, but I'll have his job. So that's very sad. Very sad.
It's human nature, though, isn't it?
No, not from everyone. It's an aspect of human nature.
Yeah, it's an aspect of human nature, but it is
not everyone is the same.
Not everyone's like that, but it is an aspect of human nature.
I agree
it's much more prevalent than people think. We don't want to think that people act like that, and that's actually how the world works. That it's dog eat dog, and people will take you out.
It's one aspect of it. It's one aspect, and there's also great humanity, love, bringing people together, people for peace. That's another aspect of humanity. You have to remember this little microcosm of the world that I'm involved in is a divide and rule thing going. It's divide and rule tactics, which is going on everywhere, left, right, you know, polarization. And a lot of it has been going on for years, but with this generation, young generation, you have to remember one of these commentators, the very interesting thing about this, they've been brought up in the era. Well, first of all, the COVID era, where everyone's online, polarized, but also this BLM era, which coincided at the same time. Remember, George Floyd, BLM, COVID lockdowns around the same time. Both those things are really powerful for young people to feel when they're just growing up. Oh my God, oh, this is how the world works. Or we just polarized, literally black or white, always right or wrong. No nuance about anything. So there's no nuance about my issues that I'm bringing up, which could have been happening all along. Over this year, we could have really nuanced discussions.
It's not about nuanced discussions.
No. So that's I'll just finish. That's kind of where I'm at. So after 5 weeks of going in, no one turning up. I mean, it's insanity. And this, because the staff supporting this, Trinity Laban supporting them, because they didn't do anything about it. And half term, well, what are you going to do? Oh, well, the students are losing their education, so we need to give your work to other teachers now. That's the end of it. So then constructors, and they knew I had to resign. They knew I would resign. It's the easiest thing for them. They want yes people, just yes man, yes woman, just we agree with everything you say to keep their jobs. Every single person is like, oh my God, I've got my mortgage, I've got my family. Oh, I haven't got not many gigs these days. Yeah, I need this month. You know, that's what's going on. So I resigned. So I have 2 legal cases against them. Constructive dismissal, it made it untenable for me to resign, and in employment discrimination. While I was there, they were discriminating. So that's what's going on. Free Speech Union, Doyle Clayton, representing me, is a employment tribunal for August 2026, booked for 8 days. If it gets that far, obviously I want them to settle. What I want is a huge compensation for what they've done to my life and a public apology. I mean, who knows whether they'll do that. They've offered a little bit of money. Why have they offered me any money if I've done everything wrong? Are they admitting something there?
Because I've gone through the same thing. As soon as this happens, they have to do a certain things to try and mitigate against the constructive dismissal. That's why they offered you to come back into work, because they'll say, well, we did it. We brought him in, but it was untenable because the students wouldn't turn up, and that's not our fault. So they're going to argue that. I mean, I've been through something similar, so that's why I keep smiling, because I saw exactly the same thing. And you know, when my situation was untenable, I had to sit in there and they go, you can come back tomorrow into your job if you want, you know, even though they've got people in and they got people now doing the job I'd gotten, and I'm not going to go into mine, because in the end my decision was just to walk away, because I realized it was I mean, my doctor said, "I've carry on, I'll die." That's how much stress I was under.
There you go.
And I know when you said that, people are going to always be over the top. No, when this happens to you, the anxiety is not like panic. It's like you feel ill, don't you? You know, I mean, my doctor thought I had cancer. I was bleeding from various places, and also, I mean, I really was not well, and it was all caused by having the fundamental thing that you are questioned, and the your fundamental moral position, which you think is a positive thing and it's who you are, to have that question to say, no, you're bad at your job, you're an evil person, you've got the wrong ideas, and all this type of thing. And uh, it's I don't believe the students are as against you as you think. I
No, I
think
don't think they are. I think
no, I think
I
most of
feel
them are on
sorry
your
for them.
side. Yeah,
I
because
really feel sorry for them, but it's my life that's been destroyed. Their
yeah,
life.
but they have in the end it's the support of this ideology, which I call it a utopian death cult. A utopian death cult is where you believe that you have the absolute idea of how the world will be perfect, but there's opponents to those, and those opponents to those, because they're against it, are evil. All fundamentalist religions are naturally utopian death cults. Jehovah's Witnesses are utopian death cults. Marxists are utopian death cults, and these are utopian death cults. It's exactly the same thing, because the problem is with their ideology is they have the and they're not aware of this. They're not intellectually aware of this. If you have this absolute moral position, what do you do with the people who don't agree? Do you argue with them, or do you send them to the gulag?
Yeah, and some kudos, what
Yeah,
you've been
and
doing for me.
in a Western liberal democracy, which is now got this ideology in it,
It's
and
got,
it's almost like the Achilles heel of a Western liberal democracy, because if you hold tolerance as a sort of Kantian categorical imperative, which I do and you do, what do you do about intolerance? Do you tolerate it? And the foolish people thinks you do. You do. You should tolerate intolerance. And this is where you get this sort of cultural relativist view of the world, where everybody, whatever culture you are, is all equal, and we should all open our arms and let them all in, even the ones who have this awful racist idea, right? That you should be measuring people based upon the color of their skin in terms of their access to the gatekeeping of jazz, which you believe you're in control of. Because your central point was not an opinion. You stated that you don't think that in the jazz world, black people are underrepresented. Is that was your argument pretty much, wasn't it? You said, I don't
one,
think
one
that there's
aspect of it, yeah.
that you don't think that racism is working upon the jazz scene to stop black people coming in. So can I throw some facts at you that I've been looking into? Can we do this now?
Yeah, I want,
Uh,
hold on 1 second. Well, I want to come in on something you said because it's not quite the same for me. You're talking about it's my attack on my moral position. It's not that. It's not the issue.
yeah,
What's happened for me is my expression has been prevented. My freedom of expression with
but I
being
could class that as the same
one,
thing.
1 second. No, my ability to play music publicly. This is my expression. I can have a rehearsal with people every now and again, but actually getting my music out to the people, and that's led by my heart. That has been stopped. It's not necessarily a moral issue for me at all. It's that's it for me. You know,
Yeah,
my
see,
expression has been stopped. That's what I'm not going to be ill, but I can see easily I could have been, but I've done some work on myself over the years, so that's helpful. I'm a nutritional therapist as well, so I know about health to a certain extent, and I had great support from FSU and good friends. Actually, friends are calling me and checking up, and that's when God, you really are my friend. Wow, that's
well, I'm hoping this video
brilliant.
that the people who watch this channel that I think there'll be a certain percentage that won't like the fact that I'm because they always just don't like the fact that you're raising it and discussing it. That's what it is. You can't even discuss it. So they'll be there saying, and they'll be going, "Why have you got to go back to this, Andy? You keep going back to this. You've done it before. Why have you got to bring race in it? You're a middle-aged white guy. You shouldn't be discussing this because it's not your thing." So I know that's going to be there, but I also know there is probably a bigger percentage that will go, "This is bad. What's happened to this guy?" He's been treated because you basically have no income, you have no work, you have no gigs, you have no way of expressing yourself, have no way after a 40 odd year career that you've established, where you've established and that's what you do, that's all been taken away. So it's basically your whole life's been taken off you
Yeah,
as
this is my
punishment
life.
for
You have
this.
to remember, my life is not about earning money from music. That's not the primary reason for playing music. This is my expression. Of course, I want to earn money from it. I should
Yeah,
do.
well, but I used to say this to my students. You only want to, if you're a creative person, the first thing you say to yourself is, "My job is to sustain my creativity," which you need a certain amount of money for. And
Yeah,
and if you're making that money, it's either a part-time job that gives you the time, or you actually embed the money making in. And that is what we teach. That is what you teach your students. It's that experience of how to do that. Now, for me, ethics and morality are actually wound inside aesthetics. So the way humanity actually negotiates aesthetics is through and morality is through aesthetics. I've talked at length on the channel. I've done hundreds of philosophical discussions. If you're a Christian and you believe in God, you believe that your morals are actually to a higher thing that exists that you believe exists in the world. If you're an artist, that is beauty, and they're interchangeable. So once you realize
yeah,
this, it doesn't actually affect whether you're a believer or not. The fact is that our want to raise up higher, which can only be aesthetic in its raw sense. In other words, our morals about what we think is beautiful or not beautiful. We have to establish what is beautiful. Killing someone or stealing from people is essentially not a beautiful thing to do. You touched on it before about a world full of love and all this type of thing, and I feel that dialectic that exists since the beginning of time is negotiated with art. I believe that when an artist makes music, for example, they're trying to balance their expression against a sense of perfectionism and purity. It's you're trying to get your own personal balance of those two attributes. And I think most musicians are aware that when you're fighting and when you get in the zone, it's not like it's not just pure free expression. You're trying to balance the grid against your expression. And I believe culturally that artists have to continually do art because at a cultural point in time, the pendulum swings from one to the other. So the Albert Ehlers, all those, the Ascensions where they're screaming on the instrument, that's the pendulum moving over to expression because it's an expression of humanity against the system. And I believe this. So this is where I come from when I say your morality will be wound up in your music making. And I think the
Yeah.
people who go towards jazz are contrarian. They believe in sort of democracy. They believe in everyone having their own voice. They believe in being able to have your own sound. They believe in the idea of swing. I mean, what's swing? These to me are moral positions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming
Yeah,
from.
it's
Yeah.
and I mean this is why I do the channel, and this is why I'm really interested in this. So any threat against freedom of expression really worries me, really worries me because
Yes.
if we haven't got freedom of expression, people can't renegotiate our ethics and morality. So and it's not just, I mean, jazz does a certain thing, but I'm on about poetry, films, books, computer games, YouTube videos, and I believe there's a hierarchy of art. And once art's had its purpose, we often stick it at the top of the hierarchy. It's like opera music, classical music, and they're dead forms. But I believe that jazz throughout the 20th century was a living form. So, in other words, the Western liberal ideas that are embedded in the Constitution, jazz is an expression of black people saying, "I want a part of that. Look what I can do. You won't let me do anything else, but within this folk form, we have transformed it into a thing where I can have my own voice within your democracy."
Yeah, you're talking about America, right?
Yeah, that's where it comes from. But
That you're not talking about now. It's
no,
different.
that's where it comes
Definitely,
from.
definitely, I agree with you with that aspect of it. Those musicians found a way. I mean, those musicians, it's so moving for me. There's incredible musicians. Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Lester Young, I mean, Louis Armstrong, whoever you want to talk about, all those geniuses, they made a way. Shit, this society is against us. They're going to make money out of us, but we want to make money as well. Yeah, we're going to find a way to fit in. Lester Young, and also, but there was an inclusivity about it, like Lester Young with his own language, all these words now, hip, cool. It's from him, isn't it? Everyone says it's from him. I don't know whether that's
Yeah,
true or not.
it is, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Of course it is.
and also, there's the complexity of the drug thing is very interesting as well. Particularly heroin, but because that's I'm not a drug person, but from what people have told me over the years and read about it, that's a very internal. You can be very focused on that drug, and that they a lot of those musicians wanted that to be their scene, an inclusive thing as well. Some bands, like Art Blakey, very interesting guy. Art Blakey. First of all, I'll give you three things he said, and some of this stuff already because I think you mentioned Africa is nothing to do with jazz, right? And then the other one, how about this one? In that book, Notes and Tones, which is one of the great jazz books by Art Taylor interviewing. And you know that book?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
The only way a white man could swing is by a noose. Right. But then the other thing, at one time, he wanted all his bands to be into drugs. That's another inclusive thing. So there's a lot of very interesting, controversial things
Well,
that
the thing is here,
Blakey said, for instance.
we can get deeply into this I studied
You
the
don't need
history
to.
of jazz and the genesis of jazz pre-Buddy Bolden. I've studied it about as much as anybody can study it. And it is undeniable that jazz is the product of integration. There's so many different music forms in. There's Hawaiian music in there. There's Scottish folk songs
Yes,
in
right,
there.
yeah.
There's Spanish music in there. There's African drumming in there. There are like bastardizations within plantations of
There's
these folk
European
forms.
harmony, right?
There's European harmony. There is Sousa marches. Probably the biggest lump is Sousa marches. It's like people playing head arrangements of Sousa marches with the influence of Spanish and African rhythms. So this is the integration. So you go look at New Orleans at that time, which is the richest cultural place in the world. Not a city of black
Right.
people. It's at that point in 1895, the richest cultural place in the world. And people are trying to argue that in that rich cultural place, that the only people that created jazz were the black ones. When the definition of black in 1895 was completely different. And one of the things I find that is absolutely astonishing is that photograph of Buddy Bolden, which is held up to be this is the first jazz musician. Look at the band, and the guy that is to the left of Buddy Bolden, tell me that's a black bloke.
I don't know the
Have
photograph.
a look at the picture.
Send
I
it to
mean,
me.
there's a guy that looks maybe Mexican, maybe Spanish, which is what New Orleans was for. But because of his racial mix, if he was 1/8 black, he was classed as black, which is why he was in the segregated black bands. Now, if jazz was part of was a product of integration and not the product of only black people's vision, right? Then certain people would have crossed the tracks. Jelly Roll Morton, the Creole middle class guy that came from a really educated family, crossed the tracks. Duke Ellington used to have Theodore Roosevelt come and watch him play baseball when he was a child because he was in a very, very high, class family. Crossed the tracks. Louis Armstrong, who was a waif from the bottom, came up and crossed the tracks and became the most important musician of the 20th century. And that story is not told if you start to put this racial dimension that they keep putting it, because the people who crossed the tracks were the contrarians. They were the contrarians. Duke Ellington was destined to go to college to be a fine artist, he was going to be an artist or a poet. He'd come from that class, but he decided to form a band and play jungle music. Think about it. And to put Duke and Louis Armstrong in the same identity bracket is to not understand the history of jazz. Is to not understand how far they were apart, to not understand that Big Spiderbeck was from a really wealthy middle class family and he crossed the tracks. You know, the Kid Ory, that Jelly Roll Morton, that if you start going through these, the Tio family, Lorenzo Tio, the Tio family, who were like classical clarinetists and brought an Italian method of playing the clarinet, which is how you play. Because that was, and they taught Sidney Bechet, who was a Creole, and that system was different to the classical system. It was unique to New Orleans. I have gone so into depth of this, and it allowed vocalization on a clarinet, which is then transformed, and Sidney Bechet emerges as the first virtuoso. Because the other thing that nobody says is that these are original jazz musicians pre-Louis, pre-Sidney Bechet were crap. They weren't very good. It was the individual geniuses that turned jazz into an art form, not black African Americans or people from. It wasn't an identity group that did it. It was individual geniuses.
Yeah, that's fascinating what you're saying.
Sidney Bechet spoke French, and he believed he was French. He said, "I'm French," and he would have said it in a French accent in French. So that's what
Didn't
he
know
knew.
that.
He was a Creole. He knew that there was a certain lineage back. And the other thing is that it's ridiculous. If you go to New Orleans, right, and you look at the white people in New Orleans, they have so much black DNA in them, African DNA, that back then they would have all been classed as black because of the mixing that goes on. Because fundamentally, people get on despite all this crap and divisions. People get on and they mix and they do take other people's cultures in and they do negotiate and they create
Yeah,
beautiful things. So when they say to you, we don't think there's enough black people there's not enough access to the jazz world for black people. We need to look at people's color and make sure we've got systems to allow them in more. And you look around and go, well, I can't see that. This is not an opinion. It can be tested, I believe. Because all we have to do is look at the establishment in the UK. So if we've got 3.71% of British people are black, we could then go and look at all the different representations. So in your college, for example, the students, was it 3% of the jazz students were black? What was the percentage?
No idea. It could be that, might be slightly more. But I've actually no idea. But the thing in my email I just wanted to bring up that no one's talked about, but you're touching on it to a certain extent, what you did earlier, is that I said this is much more to do with class than actual skin color, right? Because there are definitely poor black people, but there's poor white people as well. There's poor Asian
Which
people.
is what I posted out when I first saw it.
Yeah. So why are we not talking about that? And why have you not replied to that? I know why, because that's not the agenda. That doesn't help anybody. If the agenda
Oh, it does help people. What it helps is the elite,
yeah,
and this is why it's racist. So can I throw some facts at you now? Right. If we look at recent honorary awards from the King for jazz, I've pulled the list out that I can find, and we've got Janine Irons got an OBE in 2023. Gary Crosby got an OBE. Dr. Lindley Patrick Hamilton got an OBE. Professor John Hall got an OBE. Courtney Pines got a CBE in the recent honours list. Alfie Robertson has got a MBE. Dennis Rollins has got an MBE, and Julian Joseph. So if I look at that, we're coming in at that list. I said that two of the people are white, and the rest of them are black. Now, believe me, I hate doing this. I think it's disgusting that they are forcing us to go, well, is this the case or not? But if you actually look at the representation, those people have been given, that's like 80% black, right, against the 3.71%. Now, this is a disgusting thing to do, but I do it not to point out the race.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Yeah,
but surely are you talking about 1 year?
This goes back sort of in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, but
last
there are
10
lots of white musicians. Aren't there lots of white musicians who've got OBEs or MBEs? Or is that
the jazz musicians of what I've said, that was the ones that have got that's what's coming up in Google as best I can. Now, I told you I did this before in much more detail. It took about 2 days for me, and I can't find that information, and it annoyed me. So I've tried to do it again, just utilizing Google AI to try and draw out jazz musicians who've got an honours in recent times.
So,
that's the list we've got. So I doubt that you will then start to find there's loads of white musicians or if there is, Google's actually not pulling them out. But the reason I do this is that when you look at this, right, at the top, Janine Irons, OBE. Now, this is Gary Crosby's wife, right? Now, the reason she's got that, I believe that Julius Josephs, Dennis Rollins, Alfie Robertson, Courtney Pine, I know these musicians, they should have an OBE. I'm not saying shouldn't have them. I believe everyone on this list should have it. But the problem with this is if you're putting in controls to work against privilege, Janine Irons, she was born in Harrow. She was originally going to go into the city and work within the city, but she decides to become a jazz photographer, meets Gary Crosby, and then sets up Tomorrow's Warriors, and they've just been awarded a thing, and they've done incredible things. Tomorrow's Warriors have, but I would question whether Janine Irons is actually an underprivileged person, right? Now, the other person I haven't mentioned is Yolanda Brown. She got appointed an OBE at the age of 40. Her dad is an advertising executive. She was educated at Banks Private School. And when she left, she attained 2 master's degrees, then spent 4 years working on a PhD, and then at that point decided to become a jazz musician. And then in 2008, she gets awarded the MOBO Best Jazz Musician and the UMA winner at the age of 26 years. So at 26 years, she was able to get 2 master's degrees, a PhD, and then do all the work to get that award. And that was literally 4 years before she released her first album, which was April Showers. It came out in 2012. That year, she also kicked off a UK and overseas tour in support of her album with two concerts at the HMV Hammersmith Apollo, accompanied by a full big band at the Royal Philharmonic which is the Royal Philharmonic Concert Orchestra. Um, in 2021, the Department of Education, DCMS, invited her to sit on the advisory panel for the National Plan for Music and Education. In 2020, she was appointed by the Secretary of State Nadine Dorries as the National Council member at the Arts Council in England. Do you want me to carry on? This just goes on and on. 2022, she was appointed to chair the British phonographic industry. 2022, she receives a BAFTA nomination for Best Presenter. And in 2020, this year, she took over from Gavin Esler as the Chancellor of the University of Kent. Right?
Yeah,
She's just received an OBE at the age of 40. Now, I have worked in the industry. I had to teach my kids this. I said, there's an elite out there, they look after themselves, and they're the ones that access the music industry. And it's so easy for them. Absolutely. So I'm preparing one at the moment. Now, I'm not a Marxist. I'm not left wing in that way. I say good on them. But let's call it what it is. She went to private school. She's got a whole bunch of contacts. When she says she wanted to have a jazz musician, naturally she has access to far more people than some black kid that is living on, in the worst part of the UK and has got, the bottom of the pile, working class, surrounded by crime, knife crime, and all this type of stuff. Surely, rather, if you had put the limits on race, it allows people like her to access it guilt-free. To see what I'm saying? It allows
yeah.
it allows
So
the
Yolanda,
elites to hand out funding to people to give them. Now, I'm sure you know this person because you know the British jazz scene.
well, hold on. I know you know. I met Yolanda once.
Yeah.
Very nice woman, actually, on a panel. Who was it for? Can't remember who it was for. It was judging compositions. One of those organisations, establishment organisations. But what I would say about what you just said is that Yolanda has nothing to do with the jazz scene. She's not nothing to do. She's not grown up playing at the Vortex every year, or it's not a. It's nothing to do with that at all. And it good for
But what
her.
I've
Whatever.
just read out
She's
is
just
this. By
she's
the
just
age of
trying to
40,
make it in the system. She's just trying to make it in the system. That's all she's doing. And some people choose that route for whatever reason. It's got nothing to do with music. I mean, she uses music, and there are a lot of things I like about her and what she's done for that aspect of music that she's using. But it isn't really anything to do with what I'm been involved with 40 years. It's nothing to do with that. It's a separate thing. And there are a handful of people where it's very separate from what I would call a jazz scene. The jazz scene is very small, really, starved of funding. It's an outside music, which probably originally attracted me to it. It's an outside alternative thing in society. I've always been attracted to all those kind of things because the mainstream for me, and even more so, has nothing to do with my values or life, or it tries to control me. But she's a different kind of person, and anyone. Interestingly, I find it ironic that these musicians accept these MBEs and OBEs for a start, all over the British Empire. Seems bizarre to me, but I know it's just to be accepted. Everyone wants to be accepted. I would probably turn it down. They're never going to give me any awards or anything, of course, ever.
but the thing is, this is your interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Do you think that Trinity Laban wouldn't hold these people up as saying, look at the jazz scene and look what we've achieved? We've got all these people have got these OBs, there's all these on. This just shows you how inclusive we all are. If you take, I looked at the program for the London Jazz Festival, and that came out at 40% black in a country that's
Which year?
3.1.7%
Last year.
last year. Yeah. And now, if we look at the awards, and I can go through these awards, that comes out all the jazz awards that came out, which I looked at two things. I looked at the Parliamentary Jazz Awards, and then I looked at the JJA Jazz Awards. The JJA Jazz Awards was pretty much 100% black musicians, except for the Young Musician of the Year. That was a girl called Ursula Harrison.
What? Sorry, what awards?
That's the JJA Jazz Awards, and the other ones
What's
I
that?
looked at were the
Is that Julian
Parliamentary.
Joseph Academy?
Yeah.
So then,
So
does he
anyway,
do awards? I didn't know he did awards. Okay.
so taking those two in, that's 68%. Now, this is my take. If anyone thinks why you do this, Andy, I would say that the values of the civil rights movement in the 1960s were I totally am behind, and we as a Western liberal country have battled against racism. And as you said, when we were kids, it was far more racist. You had the National Front marching through a town being protected by the police. These things have been enacted. The question is when you get to a point where the I don't begrudge any of people those awards. I think they've earned them all. I'm not saying they haven't earned them, but what I'm saying is there's a point now where we can say this has really, really improved. It's the inclusiveness for black people, all the racism that was
Yes,
there
of course. Yeah.
has improved. And you're basically saying, has it improved to such an extent now that where this is not the issue that we need to make it? That is what you had your life destroyed for making that point. And that's why I've just done that to show the fact that to me, from my point of view, hearing it, what you've said, that is so reasonable a thing to say. So
Yeah.
why do they not want you to say it? And the reason is because this fight can never end, can it? To them, this fight can never end. There can never be a point where you go, brilliant, all our anti-racism stuff's worked, tick the box, it's great, it's all sorted now. Why can it never end? Because it's not about race.
No, it's nothing to do with race.
It's
But
about control. It's about control. It's establishment control.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of things. I still think it's divisive. That's another issue, either a main issue or a side issue that it brings up. And my case is a great example, but there are loads of other cases. There's loads of. I mean, I've been sent by a couple of musicians yesterday. I was sent before I went on GB News. I thought I need a bit of information because I hadn't looked into it so much, but about applying for festivals or applying for any kind of job. You know the game, right?
Mm.
Yeah, you're going to give priority to a black person. But what some of them was even, I mean, really ridiculous. Someone chronically ill is a priority in some arts organisations. I mean,
Yeah, look, I worked with an arts organisation called Punch Records. I helped set it up. I put in the program. I changed the program. I went into youth centres, urban youth centres, worked with black kids into rap music. I worked with about 1,000 kids over a number of years. There's no way I'm going to get an award for that. I also worked, I've set up my own arts company. I've worked on a whole ton of stuff. And what I saw within that was the arts funding is only there if you are doing something against the effect of slavery in English rural countryside or
yeah,
trans issues, blah, blah, blah. That's where the money is. And so everybody has moved around. And there's people who are part of a middle class educated elite, have got their master's degree. They've now moved into the arts, and they can access this money because they are pushing these identity buttons.
yeah,
Nobody that is poor, underprivileged benefits from this, right? And with Punch
yeah,
Records, we were doing this. Now, Amo was an incredible guy. He set it up. He has now got his MBE or OBE for doing what he's doing. But I knew all along I'm never going to get that. No one's going to ever nominate me for doing that. We just walk away. Same as you. You just walk away after having benefited in reality many students of all sorts of different identity groups. And I never saw it like this. But I saw how that works up close. And I start to think, oh my God, there is an educated elite that do not that can play the game of looking left wing and support. I believe in wealth redistribution. I believe in taxing people and having wealth, but it needs to be spent on the poor people. This agenda makes it look like you're left wing without having to actually deal with people who are underprivileged. There are groups in London that are working against knife crime. Their funding's being pulled.
Yeah,
It's being pulled and they're being
cool.
shut down, even though, and yet people are still able to access yet another piece of art to look at yet another identity issue. And
Well,
this being lobbied by people who sit in power. It really annoys me. And how these people use they've captured the judiciary. They are able to control certain things, like say your dismissal process. They can control that and influence that. And I know of actual examples where that's happening, and it's happening in the background because these people have political power and they work in circles where they can say, look, this is what's going to happen.
yeah, cool. Without our control, And there's someone called this journalist Charlotte Gill. I don't know whether you know her, but she's really on the case of documenting where all the money is going, the public funding, and it's all on those issues you're saying. I mean, even more extreme, ridiculous issues, but all to do with race or trans. You've got to have this. That's got to be what your project is about.
It has to be about that.
So how's that work? Like, we can't just play music. Like Stravinsky would say, music doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. You attach whatever you want to music. So you could, okay, I could write a suite. I could write a suite, couldn't I?
Mm.
For any of those issues you just saying it's about those. And that's what people do because they know the game, play the game. I wrote a composition called Play the Game. That's what people do. And I understand it. I find it really difficult to play the game personally because it's not my truth. And you see, the thing is, suppressing your feelings and your own truth, which all these students are now. I mean, there'll be some of them against me, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's terrible, whatever. But most of them know this is a game and they're being bigged up. But they are suppressing their own truth. That's what freedom of speech is about, really. Not even the public domain, but just when you have a conversation, one like you and I have to speak the truth to you. And I hope you have to speak your truth to me. And we can agree on some things and not others. And that's liberating to be able we've got this opportunity. We haven't been shut down yet.
No, we could, because we do live in a liberal democracy, and these two things are at war at the moment. I'll tell you where this is. They get the political pressure to say we need to do more to, enable black people to access our jazz course. That's just basically what the guy said, and you said, I don't know whether we need to do that. That's what you said. The answer is really simple. The only way that could be happening is by the statutes and rules and guidelines within your establishment. So you go through those. And if there's anything favouring white people, you take it out. It's as simple as that. So if your principal who runs the bloody college says that, that's his problem, not yours, because you don't do those. There's nothing you're doing in the classroom that can have any effect. And if you are horrendous racist, you're a horrendous racist. And if you're not, you're not. That's an individual choice. That's not systemic. He wasn't talking about individual racism. He's talking about systemic. So why doesn't he look at his rules and find out where it is? And if you'd have turned around and said, can you show me the rules that are helping white people get in? And he would say, well, it's not, is there? It's this systemic idea that there's just this racism out there. It's just out there all the time. And it's in every negotiation. Now, my argument is people, logically, there's got to be some people who are more racist than others, and the psychological studies shows that that's linked to disgust. People have a disgust urge. They have a mistrust of things coming from without and polluting within. That's something, and people have different levels biological. And people who tend to be racists, far right or far left, tend to have this disgust urge. And these people that exist making these rules are the ones that go, we cannot have this polluted. We cannot have these ideas polluted by people questioning them. Of course, there's systemic racism, and black people need to be protected from every single. It's actual violence. What you're saying is violence. You see, all this is the language of that. It's that disgust urge. It's been enacted, and you've got people on both sides arguing. Now, the liberals tend to have a low disgust urge. They don't mind about people, races mixing and having, because the whole thing about this is if you truly want there to be not a racist society, we're all going to end up as a blend. Because the only reason I says races is because people couldn't travel in the old days. Race is very insignificant visual changes based upon where you live, basically. Once you have a multicultural thing, that all this is going to go. There will be no black. There will be no whites, and there isn't because race is fluid. Now,
Well,
we live in a world where you can't say race is fluid, even though it actually is, because your status of being black is phenomenological. It's a cultural construct. In other words, you believe you're black because you believe you are, but a white person can't say they're black. So it starts to become about you
I
see.
did say that to a musician, about black musician. I said, with all
Well,
this stuff going on, I'm going to identify as black now because you can identify as male, female when you're not.
well. See, gender pretty much is it is a binary, and there's biological things in between that. But the trans issue is use those biological differences to justify a way of expression. Now, I'm all for freedom of expression. I think people should be able to express themselves however they want, and they can act however they want. And if they want to say they're a gender, whatever, I mean, I've got a problem with it. But you shouldn't change that binary because that binary is so fundamental to the way humanity works, right? Or biology, and it goes off into science, and it's actually the
Yeah,
dialectic that we have in culture. The idea of good and bad, heaven and hell, all this dialectic, which is how human beings work on the world, probably has evolved from now split in the hemispheres of the brain, and then the binary sex, which creates new things. So we don't want to throw that idea out because there is something biological behind it. But race isn't like that. Nobody is 100% black and nobody's 100% white. It's only Nazis that try and establish things like that. The whole thing to me is utterly racist. You have had to lose your livelihood and your way of expressing yourself, and this part of you, because you won't adhere to what is this awful ideology that people should be getting ticked off in your college based upon the color of their skin, basically.
yeah. And I'll tell you a story that in those 5 weeks of going in to teach, there's one class that's taught with a colleague. It's a composition class. And this colleague, who was supportive for me, couldn't make it that week. So the head of jazz puts a dep in, and the dep replacing my colleague is a student who left a year ago. I thought that's an interesting choice. Student only left a year ago, and they're coming in to teach with
Yeah.
composition class. Okay, but I like this student, I remember, and I don't know the reasons for doing that. And she was told, because she's what, 24 or something, 23, 12, I don't know what she is. And she was a great student when she was at college, interesting person, singer and composer. And she said, oh, all the students, because I'm still friends with them, she said, hey, why are you going to do that class with Martin Speake? You shouldn't be teaching with him. Also knowing no one's going to turn up anyway, but still booking her to do it. And she said, well, I want to hear what he's got to say, which is good for her. And she said two things to me. We had a long chat for the 2 hours when we should have been teaching. Of course, no one turned up. We were getting paid to have a chat. And she said the two things. One, the students won't budge. Okay. And the other one is they don't think you should talk about these things because you're white. And of course, that's not every single student, but that was the message she conveyed to me as if it's the student body.
Of course, I mean, this is what you're up against. You have to understand that if you believe there's a white supremacy, right, and that white supremacy, we have control over the system. You see, us white people.
Well, I
You and
don't.
me, you and
I
me have
do not.
control over this. It's like when I said this thing. I said I don't think jazz is a black American art form. I think it's just an American art form. The input of African Americans is incredible, and we can discuss it.
Yeah.
But you lose if you try and make it race pure and try and claim ownership by a race. It becomes really clouded because then you've got to say classical music's white music, white European music is classical music, and then you start going, well, hang on, the guy that really influenced Beethoven was a black guy. There's this composer, or Mozart. There's a composer in France that was black, and I'm like, well, if you want to get into this and you want to measure this like this, it doesn't work out. You know, there were individual black musicians that have contributed to classical music all the way through. What you're talking about, and that brigade will go, yeah, you're right, Andy, you're right. There, that is represented there. You see, if you start to do this and you argue it on these lines, and you start to get this sort of um, racial profile, I I cannot see how this is not racist unless you believe there's something special about white people, that we control the narrative. So when I was saying this, I had literally 1,000 people in America that kept saying, "You're a white, you're an old white man." The three evils. You're an old white man, and you have no right to discuss this. You are
Yeah,
trying to steal jazz off us.
right.
And I was thinking, this person in America believes they own our jazz, and they believe I'm going to steal it off them. And I put in one of the comments, I said, yeah, I have stolen it. I've got it up in the black country in Kinney. I'm taking it out to have fish and chips, and taking it to football matches. Come on, Jazz. Forget what are they on about? There is no logic to any of this whatsoever.
No, no, it's such a mix, isn't it? And of course, some of my favorite musicians are African Americans. So what? Some are not African Americans. Lee Konitz, Paul Motion, but Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins. Okay, who cares?
Well, see, the thing is, you and me had a very similar upbringing at a similar time with a parent that loved jazz. And I said this to you, and you've said the same thing. I was brought up with my dad saying, "This is Duke Ellington. He's one of the greatest composers of the 20th century." And I would look at awe in this whilst my dad explained why Duke Ellington was better. And I was like going, "These guys are better than Beethoven and Mozart. I mean, they sound rubbish to me. I don't like them. But this Duke Ellington's amazing." And my dad would say, think of the tune they're playing. He goes, now try and sing the tune whilst they're improvising. He didn't say it like that. So I'd sing the tune. And my dad did a really good job of pointing out the genius of these people. And to me, it was the highest. I was like, who wants to be a classical musician when you can actually make the music up on the spot? And it's
Exactly.
better
Exactly.
than,
That's the attraction to it, isn't
yeah.
it?
And so when I grew up, and this in the 80s when they started to emerge, I hadn't really thought that these people were black or white. I was aware of the blackness in them. I was aware of the cultural thing. If somebody would said, oh, can you make that beat more black, I know exactly what they mean. But that's an aesthetic thing. It's not a statement of reality, it's a vibey thing. And also I believe that when I listen to certain drummers, because I've been a drummer, I was very sensitive to groove. So I'd listen to Harvey Mason, or I'd listen to Mike Clark, Steve Gadd, or I'd listen to Bernard Purdie, and I go, they've got a groove that these other drummers haven't got. And I recognise it as a black groove, but they weren't all black drummers.
No, exactly.
you
Exactly.
know, and it's like it's the same things that say with blues. Like it, and those musicians, I would put Anthony Braxton at the peak of this. Anthony Braxton is so interested in the non-African American elements of jazz, isn't he? As a player, he's
Yeah.
exploring, and it's very logical and mathematical. It's very cerebral what he's doing. It's also quite avant-garde in a very Western art tradition of avant-garde.
Yeah.
He was like a chess master. That's what I always think his music's like. And you demean him as a player by lumping him into some sort of identity group. And that's true of every single player. It doesn't see them as individuals. And if you're interviewing people for Laban and you've got an interview process, it should not just be on their technical ability or their things. It should be on their individual personality. And you should be able to judge that without having a prejudice on you to go, but because what else can you do in terms of what your boss was asking you to do? What else can you do? This is my point. What are you supposed to do?
Well, just on that,
And
I'll
the
give.
only answer is not talk about certain things in a,
Yeah, I
in a
mean,
college,
look,
in an educational
Andy,
department.
hold on. Let me come in. Some very interesting things. Okay, anti-racism seminars. They did those a few years ago. I can't remember. And I thought, I'm not going to go to this. It's ridiculous. Okay, and I emailed HR, same HR person who was in that meeting about me, the secret meeting. And I said, listen, I got arrested protesting against racism when I was a kid. I've taught black music for 30 years. I don't need to go to an anti-racism seminar. And she said, oh, you'd be a great person to go and share your experiences. And I thought it was compulsory because I was there, right? So I go to the meeting run by a couple of young black people, female and male, who, it was appalling. In my view, it was appalling. 2 hours long. I stayed through the whole thing. Pretty much black people can't be racist, 5 pillars of racism, whatever. Sat through this kind of nonsense. And then I said it to the head of jazz, and they said, no, I didn't go. No one went, apart from me in the jazz course. There are other people there in the classical side, and there were facilities, all kinds of people. Everyone had to be there. One guy who's my hero, who was in the front desk, just walked out after 5 minutes, said, this is not for me. However, the head of jazz said to me, but, interesting. No, I didn't go to them. I didn't know they were compulsory. And he got told by HR, I'm going to fine you £100 unless you go. It's what is going on. It's incredible.
Because the general public don't understand that this is going on, and they can't frame it, because what they think anti-racism is a directive out there socially to try and stop you being a racist. That's what they think it is. And nice people, especially middle class nice people, especially white middle class nice people who don't live in areas where there's any other ethnic minorities, the ones that live out in the Cotswolds, they can show that they, even though they don't have to worry about it because they never meet anyone except other white people, they can virtue signal how nice they are by going around saying, I'm not a racist. And that's the surface. That is the surface. But underneath here is an ideology which is political. And there are basically 2 ways of approaching racism. There is the colorblind way, and there is the race aware way. And the anti-racism is the race aware. And those 2 things are at war. If you go into America, where this is politically happening, you will find black academics that completely believe in the colorblindness, people like Coleman Hughes, and you'll get people that believe in the opposite. In music colleges a few years ago, 20 years ago, to combat racism, they would be appointing positions with a screen. So you weren't allowed to see the race of the person. And that was to eliminate racism. But this ideology is saying you eliminate racism by being aware of the race. Now, everyone's going to counter me, and they're going to think that I haven't researched this. They are going to say you cannot deal with racism unless you, by denying race, it's like denying their blackness, and you deny their experience of racism.
I don't think it's race. I think it's skin color.
Yeah,
pigmentation. I don't think it's race.
I mean, that's the thing that we're putting on it, but that's their point of view. They will. It's like, so. For example, African Americans. They said to me over and over again. They said, "You don't understand what we mean by the word black. You think black means like an ethnicity or a skin color. It's not. It's an experience of being American." It's an American experience of living, and it's specific. Black Americans lived under a unique situation where they were all slaves and they were all freed. They were stuck under Jim Crow, and then you had redlining, and there's a whole bunch of things if you're an African American. So there's African American folk forms relates to that experience. But the problem you have with that is in the UK, right? In the UK, the black jazz musicians are excluded from that in the same way as we are, because they haven't had that experience. So they have to construct their own experience.
Well, that's why it's a bit odd. And some black musicians over here say that jazz is black music and identifying with African American music, but that's not their culture. They're brought up in London, in Hackney. It's not the same. It's a totally different experience.
And the thing is, what happens is the very specific melting pot and like nuclear reactor of American racism. We've got slavery, creates a specific thing. If you want to understand jazz, you do have to understand that. In the UK, the black experience is completely different, and there was tremendous racism, but it was a different type of racism under a different circumstance in a different time, and actually in a way closer to their experience. So the real horrors are in and it's to do with our Commonwealth. It's to do with the fact that we open these arms and you come here, and be part of the British way, and people have been brought up with believing in those values. No African that was taken to a slave was going, I can't wait to come to America because we're going to have milk and honey. They weren't thinking that. So the experience is completely different. And anybody like me or you that is interested in culture, which is basically interested in music and art and all this stuff, to discount these things and turn them into a dumb version of it, which is black good, white bad, which is basically what it is. Anyone who wants to dumb it down like that actually denies the actual experience of British black people, right? And the part that that's played. So here's an example of it. Joe Harriott is one of the most important musicians of the 20th century, right? Would you agree?
Maybe. I think he's a great musician. Okay.
You know, a pioneer of free jazz before Ornette Coleman, and a pioneer of fusing, you know, Indian music with jazz, and some another things,
Important
right?
contributions.
Yeah. Now, the reason why he's not a household name is not because he's black; it's because he's British, and he wasn't British, but you know what I mean, because he
Yeah.
was part of the British jazz scene. So there is a problem with the British jazz scene, and the problem with the British jazz scene is created by the jazz scene itself.
Well, it's thought of as an underdog. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I'll give you an example. Underdog all the time. So when I used to play at Ronnie Scott's, when Ronnie was alive, was great because you could play there 6 nights a week, but it was always the support band. Okay, he didn't care what you played, he didn't care what you wore, as long as you're on stage at this time. And it was wonderful to be able to do that. To play your music, it's impossible to do that anywhere in the world. Play your music for 6 nights in a row, 2 sets, opposite, normally a band that's totally different from you, completely inappropriate, but that's how they did it. But I was lucky to play opposite, you know, Horace Silver, Betty Carter, I don't know, a few other bands. And but it was always the underdog, and the volume level was lower through the PA. You know, and so that was the one thing I objected to, that not the volume level, but the why don't you do it the other? Why don't the British band be on and the main band? So there's always this thing, always, and the students see this, young people, everyone sees. We're underdogs to the Americans. They're the creators, so we're never going to be as good as them. You know, so we're just the underdogs the whole time, and that's unfortunate. However, what's been good is that people have created very different kinds of music to the American tradition. That's great, taking stuff from it, but making something totally different. My music's like that. You know, the different projects I have are influenced by other things: Indian music, Arab music, classical music, whatever. So, you know, and there are different scenes in London. There are different scenes, you know. There's people who really want to recreate the American thing. And there's some bands. I was watching one on YouTube. It sounded fantastic. These musicians, like a hard bop quintet. Sounds great. And that's a recreative thing. So there's different sections. Then there's the whole free improv scene. And there's a little bit of an interesting in traditional jazz, really great players who've gone into Louis Armstrong 20s, 30s music in London. Fantastic with Britain generally. Then there's what the fusion thing that you're interested in. You know, there's all these different areas. You know, it's a bit of a drag, this conversation, I've realized, in a way. Do you know what I mean? To limit, I mean, in the sense of this music is so wide. It's so
this is the point. This is hopefully when people watch this, that this is going to be probably the longest interview I've ever done on the channel, because we're coming up to 2.5 hours now, and I don't think we're quite done yet. If we look at the history of jazz, the thing that's never spoken about was when Reagan came to power in America. The funding for arts changed, and it moved from funding the avant-garde to funding much more conservative things like opera and classical music. And so jazz had to readjust where it's coming from, and it had to say, well, jazz is like the classical music of America. It's the great American art form, which it is. And who emerges out of that was Wynton Marsalis. Now, Wynton Marsalis was part of the New Orleans jazz elite, as they all are. All those musicians that emerged many of them have relatives that were already in the jazz world. You get that preponderance of musicians that are related to older jazz musicians. It's part of the jazz elite. I'm not saying they're part of the money elite, but they were part of the jazz elite. And Wynton Marsalis was great because he could play classical music as well. And
Yeah.
so the culture of that time went, oh my God, these jazz musicians is so good that they could actually play classical music. The
A way to
funding.
get
It's.
accepted.
I mean, this is totally what it is. And he comes out, and
Yeah.
then he takes on Miles. And Miles Davis was the great forward-thinking avant-garde musician, always in the future. And he was the past, and Winton was the past, right? In 1987, they then enshrine this in law, this preservation of jazz, and the funding starts to come through. Now, Winton, back in the early 80s, I saw him as the enemy, but actually he has argued very strongly that jazz is not a black music form, it's an American music form. And the people I
Yeah.
came up against in America were very upset when he said the blues was actually, he called it uh, um like, was like Gaelic American music. He said it's basically Scottish and Irish music, the
Yeah,
blues is.
I'm just looking for Winton quotes because I wrote a couple down.
Yeah. So,
Because
but the
because
point is, what we have to get away that is that now in jazz, what you've got is a situation where if you are one of those people that can access that big money like Wynton Marsalis, he gets over $1 million a year to run the jazz at the Lincoln Center, and everybody who turns up to
there we
go to
go.
that is the elite. It's the top. There's nothing against that, and the same thing's happened in the UK. There's a very small group of musicians, but the thing is in the UK is the person that emerged on that sort of conservative jazz renaissance that happened in the 80s was Courtney Pine. And I thought Courtney was far more interested because he brought his British reggae roots to the music. And I felt his music was freer than Winton's was. It was more culturally diverse. I think this is a thing that happens in jazz. British jazz, when it's at its best, it opens up to the cultures that exist, and that includes the English cultures, folk music, English folk music, the English
Exactly.
classical tradition, the English eclectic, but also reggae, ska, two-tone, and all the things
Yeah.
that have come out of the UK, punk. And I think that's where jazz is at its strength. And so the directive of the Trinity Laban to say we've got to focus on black music, it totally will not create, it will kill jazz because the jazz won't be alive, because British jazz musicians won't learn to know that they can bring their own personal culture, which means white people bringing in their white English culture. I know it's a total, that's evil, but I believe that that should be in the jazz. When I think back to when I was a kid, the main guy was Clark Terry, and Clark Terry he had a very English take on it. I can't explain, but it was wound into the music. It is, do you feel that
I never
a
thought
lot of
about
the
that,
great,
but
they
what you mean
really
the way he phrased, or what do you mean the way what do you mean?
because it was almost like the themes. I felt that he would that a lot of the sort of 70s, 60s and 70s jazz musicians, they would deal with, like I said, like someone like John Sermon. He would be another one. I could. It's like they're dealing with the English literary tradition, perhaps.
Well,
Um,
definitely
uh,
John Sermon, you can hear that in his work.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
and with Stan Tracy, I felt that there's some of the themes and the structures are the sort of almost like the classical tradition that was in some of those compositions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's definitely an Englishness in all those people. Yeah, even though Stan loved Duke Ellington and Thelonious Monk, he always says they were his main influences. But just to think of tunes,
Well,
some
as I'm
tunes are quite
struggling to
English.
think through it, I went for Clark Stan
You
Tracy.
said Clark Terry, but I don't know why you said.
Oh, don't, I didn't mean Clark Terry. So this is what happens when you get old. Yeah, Clark Terry definitely wasn't having any English. No, I was on about a Stan Tracy.
Oh, maybe you meant Clark Tracy, and then you went to
Clark Tracy.
Stan
Well, I think,
Terry.
well, poor old Clark Tracy, he's put a thing up recently, so he's got no bloody work. And he's struggling. And then I saw another musician the other day. My friend John Paul says he's got no work. And I'm like going, this is what you've got to think about. There's no bloody work for jazz musicians. How are you going to support it? How are you going to support these people? Not go worried about whether there's enough black people,
I know,
coming from the middle class black end of the market to go to
I
Trinity
know,
Laban.
because there's no infrastructure to support this music. As we said right at the beginning, there's a few individuals who manage to work the system in some way. Some, regular funding, or they get a huge amount of funding sometime, or whatever. There's a handful of those people. People have told me in other countries, people get salaries. I don't know whether it still exists in France or in Norway. Where the arts, I don't know whether they still are funded well. You don't have to jump through all these hoops. But maybe that's different now, because now applying for any money is just everyone gets put off. And the thing about this applying for money for the Arts Council, and I've done this, people just pay someone else to do the forms because no one's got a clue how to fill the forms in. Unless you're totally got into the woke thing and you know the agenda, and it's nothing to do with music.
Of course,
Still,
it isn't.
absolutely nothing to do
And
with music.
the way that you get that funding in some cases, right, is that you have somebody who's part of the establishment that you know, and you pay them a backhander to write the form correctly, so it
Yeah,
will be accepted. It's
that's
not just
exactly it.
paying someone to do the forms. Those people usually have an inside thing, and I feel like this is a conflict of interest because you have to be part of the elite to know someone in the system that says, I want to apply for the Arts Council funding, and then if you're in a position where they're saying to you, well, you're going to have to do this and this and jump through these hoops, who are these people who know that? I tell you, it's not the people off the street, normal people
No,
who
well, I'll
need the
tell you who
money.
it is. I'll
You
tell
see
you
what
who
I'm
it is.
saying?
It's people who are used to arts admin or worked in the city. There are these people. There is
Which is why I
people.
read out that awards that two of the people I picked on that I hadn't heard of are both have come from the city, have been to private school, and have grown up with a bunch of people around them that are also in that situation. I worked in the music industry as well, but mine was in the rock end, played for Robert Plant, did all that stuff. I've been right at the top end doing gigs for like 50, 60,000 people. That was my life. I saw exactly the same thing happen. It's always happened. If you take, I'm doing a thing at the moment which I've taken the 10 big sort of British pop stars like Sam Smith, Ed Sheeran, and all that, and I'm going through them methodically, showing the private school they went to, the fact that their parents are millionaires, their links to the arts industry, and the people that they went to school with who are also in the industry, to show you how it works. I used to say to my students that if you're exploring someone like Sam Smith, for example, who's one of our big exports at the moment, don't get sidelined by all that binary gender thing. Look at the mom. The mom was in finance and was a millionaire because
Right.
you and I think this is what jazz is. Jazz has ended up as an elite form that, so if you're rich, your virtue signaling kids can go out and be supported to have a jazz career because they haven't got to go and get a job, they're not trying to like pay for the heating bills. The whole thing is elitist. For me, I would be, if the college wants to do something about it, why not do that? Because by doing what the thing that you pointed out, and you said this at the time, what about the working class black kids or the working class white kids? And both of those are never going to go to Trinity Laban.
No, I mean,
They don't even know what Trinity Laban is.
overall, yeah, you're right. Um, there will be some people who are from a little bit poorer backgrounds at Trinity Laban, from what I can remember. I haven't gone through everyone's background, but overall, you're right. Yeah, that they are being supported. And also, the thing about the fee thing is they don't pay that directly anyway, do they? So that's a bit of an illusion. However, it's this problem on their back for the rest of their life, and they know that. They feel that. So that's a suppression thing as well. I have to say, I was always attracted to this music early on because I thought it was a working class music.
It was. It was. It
That's what I
totally was.
thought. Overall, it was. I would say not everyone. We all know Miles came from a more privileged background, and other people come from more privileged
It
background.
actually, to me, it doesn't matter. I've got
Can
to
I
state
say
this.
so? Hold on,
I
Andy.
don't care. Yeah, I
Hold on.
don't.
Let me just say something.
Mm.
But overall, that has transformed. That has changed now. It is to do with the fees. That's one thing. When I taught at these colleges before fees, which was mainly the Royal Academy of Music because I was there the longest, been there the longest, the students, they're just different kind of people. They were just different kind of people because they weren't paying fees. Yeah, so anyone could go if you were good enough, to get in, basically. So unfortunately, it has transformed everything. And I think a lot of what you're saying there is right about the actual privilege of it is a privilege black and white students,
Yeah.
right?
It,
In some form. But everyone, I'm more privileged than someone's more privileged than
yeah.
me.
We've all got
It's a
privilege.
ridiculous word
Yeah.
anyway. So I
So
shouldn't have said
the way you get around it is just to take that out. And what you do is you look at you basically on class, so you go, how much money have you got? That's the way to do it. If you want to redistribute, you redistribute based upon class. I I'm quite capitalistic. I ain't got a problem with these rich people playing jazz. If their parents will work for it and they can now pay for their kids to be jazz musicians and go around the world, touring, have it all paid for. I'm not going to stop that. I'm totally, anyone can do what they want to do. But you can point it out, and when this ideology comes at you, I believe the way to counter it, you go, no, you are being as prejudiced, you are being as elitist as everybody else. You've fallen into the trap. The establishment will always work towards that, right? But my point is, I don't have a problem with establishment. I've got to say this. I haven't got a point with those people having OBEs and MBEs. I haven't got a problem with all those
No, it's
jazz
up to
awards.
them.
And if they want to give Jack DeJohnette an award for jazz, bloody hell, God, he deserves it. He's the greatest jazz drummer of the last
Yeah, he's a
50
very
years.
special musician.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, and he's done incredible things. But I want to judge Jack DeJohnette on his ability, not on the colour of his skin. When I was a kid, I used to love Jack DeJohnette. I thought he was French.
With the name, yeah.
I just thought he was French. And then
Jeanette.
when I watched this Blue Note concert, and he was playing. Who was he playing with? I can't remember. And when I saw him, he doesn't look French to me. Maybe he's not. It was like I didn't. My
Could be
idea
French.
of who he
Could be French.
was because I don't know. A lot of this is a generational thing. Our generation have a version of what racism is, and so we're there getting all high and mighty because we think, well, you shouldn't judge people by the color of the skin. And then this younger generation have been told you should judge people by the color of their skin. But I think it is about to bite our culture on its arse. Serious. Because what's going to happen, I think, in education, because remember, I taught level 3, then I wrote the HND, and I was in the I was all starting to write a degree when I lost my job. So I explored all this, and I could see that if the Tories had stayed in, they would have taken away funding for courses where that loan was not paid off within 5 years.
Okay.
That was coming in, and Sunak had announced this. That was where their travel was. Now, this Labour government, to give them their due, because there's not much I'll give them their due on, but their educational report is actually a lot better at the moment, and they're putting creativity at the heart of education. So it's really important. Now, I think that's right going forward. Believe it or not, I think there's an argument that we'll need jazz musicians in the future because when AI comes in and AI starts to take everybody's jobs away, right? You will need people with an ability to improvise. And so, if the courses was to focus on the aspects of improvisation and the qualities within jazz that enables you to, because I've always seen jazz as a nuclear reactor aesthetically. It creates new forms, and you put the stuff in the nuclear reactor, and these new things come out. And musically, I think that if the educational establishments were to focus on that and change their directive, you could be developing young kids for the future, because I think it's actually very exciting and healthy. And I think free expression is going to become a thing. Well, you can see it on YouTube already. You can see it on YouTube already that, you could sell free expression very easily on YouTube. The story of jazz, you can sell better. The trouble is the establishment of jazz hasn't recognized that yet. You
Okay.
see,
Well,
that's I really believe that's the case, and I think that we're on the culture is shifting now. It's moving, and you're a victim of that dying thing. I don't think this would have happened to you 5 years ago, because I don't think these elites had to hold on to the ideology so strong, because they are very aware now. Because this is what this is Brexit. Brexit showed that the man in the street doesn't think any of this. That's what it was. The man in the street doesn't care about identity politics whatsoever.
no, exactly. Yeah.
And
They, they,
so
they,
that's
it's
and
kind of,
that's why they're having to maintain their position in this way. I believe it's crumbling at the moment.
I hope so. Your bit about creativity. So that's the thing about playing jazz. It is one of the most amazing things you can do. I reckon. Create improvised music, creative music, because you have everything in it. You've got to combine with other people. It's a democratic
Yeah,
function. Jazz quartet. It's functionally idea in a real incredible democratic thing. You've all got your roles, and they are subordinate to the whole. and your roles have got to be compatible with others, but you can have friction with them. And then you have your moment to stand out front and improvise. And so you are the leader for a bit. And that can happen to anyone in the band. Right? And then you drop back in your supportive role again. Certainly for the three rhythm section players, it's more difficult for saxophone player, but you know, that's why I'm always trying to play all the time with the rhythm sections. There's something very profound about it, actually, in relation to what you say. So yeah, I mean, I hope it's the one thing AI won't really be able to do. I mean,
That's why I brought it up. Yeah,
AI is due
it
to
can't
take
do
over,
this. Yeah,
and it's horrendous from an overall point of view for me. The AI and the technocratic kind of takeover, which I believe the plan. However, they're not going to do it with real, truly improvised music in the moment. It doesn't matter how far AI goes. It's not going to happen with jazz. Real jazz, I'm talking about.
I've
computers, Andy. There are machines ages ago. There was a robot playing a giant step solo somewhere on YouTube. Ages ago. Okay, you can do that. That's not improvised. Yeah.
Like if you take the giant steps argument, culturally that comes from a certain period of time, and there's a civil rights movement going on, and you've got different musicians trying to bust jazz out. Like I say, because jazz musicians are always trying to push the boundaries. And Coltrane decides to take the 251 and try and bust it out of its system by sort of putting the 251 into 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions. And you see all these things that Coltrane was doing. He wasn't doing it to be clever. He was doing it because he had this spiritual idea that he could free harmony by having cadences working in 3 dimensions with like major thirds in between and that whole matrix things that he came up with. And now,
well, he didn't come up with it, but he got it from, you know, Dave Liebman said very interestingly. Dave Liebman posted me a few things years ago where that actually came from. It's a 3 key. It's a major third. Part. But that's from classical music, no question. But also it's from a Jerome Kern song from the 20s. The three modulations. And Duke Ellington. There's been a few people historically before Coltrane. There's nobody original. There's no.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think
did these all from elsewhere.
What was the jazz standard he spotted in? Is it How High the Moon? He spotted that cadence within it. But the thing is that when you look at Coltrane's notes, though, because the jazz he's moving towards this sort of most spiritual aspect of jazz, and there's a dialectic of this sort of spiritual enlightenment, but there's also the pain. And that's why he wants to pull it out. When I listen to something like Interstellar Space, I can still hear I can still hear him running through those. You know that
because he had an extensive knowledge of harmony and melodic shapes. He's not going to get rid of that. Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
what on B minor on impressions, he's playing a load of changes. You know.
Yeah.
It's one chord, but he plays a load. I mean, a good example of that. We can get into music in more depth next time if you want. A good example of that is but one of the first times he played the giant steps harmony is on Limehouse Blues, which he played on it's called Cannibal in Chicago or something, or Cannibal Fidelity. It's the band without Miles. It was Miles' band without Miles at that time. And the first chord of Limehouse Blues is one chord. It's a dominant chord. And he puts his giant step stuff over it. And he could do that over one chord on a minor key as well, in an impression. So I think I've just given the example of, first of all, he stole it from other places. Everything is stealing, as Stravinsky says. Just steal from everywhere, but then you do it in your own way. And Steve Coleman said to me an interesting thing. I said, Steve Coleman, who I've kept in contact with sometimes, a great saxophone player. I studied with him a little bit. I said, oh God, I heard Charlie Parker play this whole tone phrase. I have no idea where he gets it from. And Steve said to me, oh my God, I was listening to Johnny Hodges and I nearly had a heart attack because he played the same phrase in 1936 with Lionel Hampton. And Charlie Parker stole that phrase and then plays it on a totally different context. This is the thing about this music. It's
it's so cerebral and yet it's so emotional at the same time. And what you see is each jazz musician is taking this stuff because nobody wants to play like in a consonant manner through the changes. We all want to push at the limit. So when you hear jazz musicians, it's the way that they push the limits, which is essentially the blue note, isn't it? The blue note represents something, you know, like a minor third over a dominant chord. That sound for me embodies a certain thing within jazz. You know that sound. And but the point is that if you step back, these musicians are trying to push the boundaries. They're trying. Coltrane's trying to bust it out. Ornette Coleman's trying to bust it out. Steve Coleman, I did a thing with this bass player, and his vision of, I mean, he's another really important musician in the last sort of 40 years of jazz.
Yeah,
And
incredible.
you know, and his concepts that I was quite influenced by this sort of that you know that of seeing the root as being in the middle rather than at the bottom, and then you have sort of extensions off high and low. And
Layers.
it was Rich Brown, I think he was called, the bass player. And I said, why was he doing this? And he said he's trying to explore the infinite. He said, so he said one day he comes and he said, I've got this thing and it's 22/7. I'm going to play in 22. I want you to play in 7. And then the harmony's based over 22/7 because it's pi, and because pi recurs infinitely. And so
That's right. Yeah, he takes everything from the natural world, well, all kinds of places, the planets, everything.
I don't think people understand this is what jazz musicians are doing. And I think this idea that sort of limitless, beyond race, beyond identity, beyond even human beings, a lot of these, you know, think of someone like Sun Ra, you know, and how absolutely futuristic and yet ancient history. A lot of the great musicians, like jazz musicians, I could hear like ancient history and the future all at the same time. You know, there's
Yeah,
something that
exactly.
exists in that. This is why I don't buy this sort of African music slave experience. Like I don't hear that in the best jazz. It's way beyond time and space.
Yeah.
It's expansive. It's like the embodiment of the fourth dimension almost. It says something about us position in the universe. It's how important jazz is.
Yeah, we can channel anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And many jazz musicians, and this is something on my channel that has been like a spiritual awakening for me, is doing this channel and then me talking about this. And I also play and I've had musicians on, but it's as though there's this, I can't quite put my hand on it, but it binds everybody together. And so I've now got friends all over the world from all different backgrounds that are all supporting this idea. And I keep coming back to it. I think it's love. I think it's love that jazz and all music is made out of love.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to
That's all
communicate
we
to
have.
people. Yeah.
Ultimately, that's all we have. We've got to just tap into it. And the powers that be, I have to say, trying to prevent that. That's why this division is going. It's totally unnecessary. All this division on any issue, pick an issue, has to be polarized. Why? There's a bigger subject that I can go into next time if you want, but why is everything polarized? Why are there no nuance?
Well,
Why is
when I was
gray
going
area?
through my thing, which is nowhere near as bad as yours, but when I was going through all the pushback against what I'd said, I'd gone to drop my kids at school and I was walking out, and then this guy comes walking down the road, and it's this black guy, and he got this little white girl, and he was holding hands with her, and he was taken to a school, and I thought he's taken that girl to school. He is protecting her and make sure she arrives at school safe. Why is he doing that? Because he probably loves that girl. And the thought of that, I burst out crying walking down the road
Yeah, it's
because I
very
thought
moving. I know what you mean.
that's the fundamental value, and that's what I hear in jazz when I watch Billie Holiday on that 1957 show, and Lester Young comes up and
Oh my
says
God.
one of the best solo, probably the best solo ever, you
Best
know.
solo in jazz.
Yeah, that
And the
and
connection with the two of them.
yeah,
Oh
and
my,
her face,
it's
the
so
love,
moving.
and you go, that's actually what jazz is about. And to see Jerry Mulligan's utter respect for these musicians, and then Jerry Mulligan come in and go, this is the new thing now, and see people like Ben Webster nodding away, and see it's not even
Yeah.
about race.
Great vibe.
It's about age. It's about class. Everything diminishes. It all
Yeah, there's a
goes.
great moment. I'm glad you mentioned that. There's an incredible moment in music that in the
And
world of
they're all
music.
phenomenal, but that Lester Young solo
Oh God, I
is
think it's so
perfect,
profound.
isn't it? It's
That's
just
so beautiful.
perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
And the look on his eyes when he's playing is
And it's slow. You can play slow
ba-ba-da-da,
to be
ba-da-da,
profound. Yeah.
ba-da-da, ma, da, ba-da-da-da-da,
Yeah, it's stunning.
ba-da-ba-da-da-da-da,
Yeah, it's stunning.
ba-da-da,
So good.
ba-ba-da-da.
You got it.
I'm
It's
with,
so
and the
done.
thing is, it's like I spoke to you yesterday. We've had this long conversation, and when we come down to it, that after all this big conversation, and we've tussled a little bit, which is really good because we've got different opinions. But then you and me are united. As soon as I sing that to you, you'll go, "Oh, Andy, he gets it," and I know,
Oh
and
my
I'm going,
God,
"Oh,
yeah.
Martin, he gets it. He gets it." If he, how can both of us go that solo on the Billie Holiday is like one of the best solos in jazz ever? What
Because
are we
there are
talking
some things, I'll
about?
tell you why, because some things are universal. Some things are universal in the human experience, and you can't even put them into words. It just touches you. Not that every person in the world is going to relate to that, because perception is a big thing, and our upbringing and everything like that, you know.
I
But
mean,
there
I
are
mean, look,
universal
here's the
things.
proof. I've got the little tears coming in my eyes of what you just said then about some things are universal, and what the universal thing is not some elite thing. It's love.
Yeah, I mean,
It's love. And
I'll
Lester
be
Young was
crying in a
such a.
minute thinking about this music. There are
We all
certain
gonna we're
love.
gonna we're gonna
Love
end up sobbing our
Supreme
eyes.
is a Can I speak? Love
Yeah,
Supreme
sorry,
is a
mate.
universal thing, kind of blue. I know they're pushed promotionally by the record label. There's something universal about those albums. And one thing I do recommend everyone watches if they've never watched this thing on YouTube, and it's a centenary of Charlie Parker at the Lincoln Center. I don't know whether you've seen this, and it's a panel discussion with Terry Lynn Carrington, Charles McPherson, I can't remember the others, Rudress, the alto player, and a couple of rapper, really interesting people. Lincoln said, and Charles McPherson, I mean, I just cry thinking about it. He said, Charlie Parker, it's not about A minor 7, D7, sharp 11. It's nothing to do with that at all. You have to remember, this guy in his early 20s could tap in to the whole of human experience and put it through his music. And as Wynton Marsalis says, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, you're never going to sound like Charlie Parker. You've got no chance. It doesn't make any difference where you're from. You're never going to sound like that. And I really recommend everyone watches that. It's absolutely stunning. I'll send you a link later, Andy. I mean, when Charles McPherson talks, who's also a great saxophone player as well, by the way, talks about Charlie Parker, I can guarantee crying every time. It's so, he's tapped into what it means, what Charlie Parker really means. And this is the thing about teaching jazz. I just teach the nuts and bolts functionally. I'm not going to teach someone how to be emotional or how to have a life experience. You can't do that with anyone. You can't. They have to have their own life experience and put it in their music. So my life experience is a particular thing, and it should be valued as yours is and somebody else's. Everyone should be valued, and it is all about love. Totally agree with you.
Yeah. And I think if to temper everything we said right at the end of this, because I think the fact that we got the little tears in our eyes, we must have got to
Yeah,
the
we're both.
natural.
I've been
We got to the
tears, mate.
natural thing, I have to say, I know I've talked over you a little bit. I do apologise for that. It's because I'm so emotionally fired
I
up
can
about
feel it. I
this.
can feel it
Yeah, I'm
coming
really,
on.
I feel like I'm fighting for something, and I feel like I've got certain ideas that
Yeah,
I want to try and get out there because
yeah,
there's to counter everything we've said. If you are a black kid grown up in a racist country and you've experienced racism and you get given a saxophone or a trumpet and you have that ability to play the jazz, that will take you. It's such an important thing for them to be able to express
it can
their.
save your
You
life.
know when you say you've we all. So if your lived experience is one of racism and prejudice, that because it's like my daughter, she was having real. She's a brilliant singer. My daughter is, and she once she got on stage and sang and people heard her voice, and I kept saying to her, sing in your own voice, sing in your own voice, always sing in your own voice. Listen to Billie Holiday, listen to Ella Fitzgerald, they're both brilliant. And I've really pushed that into her. And now when she gets up and sings, everybody recognizes that. And for someone who's had racism, the opportunity for them to express their lived experience, like you said, is so important. It's so important. And what we're arguing is a system that does let those people come through. But to put the limits on it being about race,
No, it's
what
a
you
bad
do
idea.
is you become inclusive and you just open your arms up to everybody,
Yeah,
and so you have to undo all these prejudices against there. And in the UK, it's still class, right? Still class is the number one, but it's also looks, how well or ill you are. There's, but I really feel that looks is one of the biggest things, in terms of people being able to move within society. I used to teach kids. I'd have somebody in there, and their parents were millionaires. They lived in a 25 bedroomed house, right? That would be. I can remember somebody saying this, and
Oh, can I live there?
this one kid, I can remember saying, I said, "How many houses you got in your house?" Then? And he said, "I've got 8." And I said, "You can't use all those bedrooms. I bet they're all done out nice." And he went, "Yeah, we've got like beds, but we never go in them." And I was going, "I'm going to come
Wow.
round your house. I'm going to break into one of those bedrooms. I'm going to live there. You won't even know I'm there. You'll never know." And I tell you why. I said, because you're like little Lord Fauntleroy sat in the corner with your mom dropping soft cheese into your mouth and grapes. You're not going to know. And this kid was laughing his head off as we all came to, because the humor, or humor brings people together. And at the same time as I had that girl with I can remember them having a competition. The rich kids were having a competition of how many chimneys they got in their house. And this one girl goes, "I've got 17." And she goes, "Well, I've got 22." And I'm
Oh
sat
my
there
God.
going, "I've got one." And this is
That's another
and
world.
I've got nothing against those, but at the same time, there was a kid there, and he was from a single parent family. His mom was dying of cancer, and he would leave college, go home, look after his mom, cook the dinner, go out and do a job on a paper round to build up the benefits so they had enough food to eat, and then go home. And I saw him a few years later, and he had to, at 16, have his mom die with him looking at it, and then be chucked out onto his own. And I can remember looking at them and thinking, this is the disparity. But the way I dealt with it was by knowing the students, and I did have my own bias, but it was based on them as individuals.
This is the whole thing. It's everyone's got their own story.
Yeah,
This is so important. It's so important. And the other thing about music, I remember I got a lot of respect for this guy. You might know him. Femi Colioso. He's a drummer in Ezra Collective, this band, and he was at Trinity Laban. We used to have good chats, and I was very, very impressed with what he did a few years ago. Very moving, posting online, maybe on Facebook or something, when there was so much knife crime, which of course it probably still is, right? And he was saying how music can save you to do this.
it
It's
can.
somebody when he was young, he had someone encouraging him, get him into music. And music has a lot of things, jazz particularly, but all kinds of music. Discipline, self-discipline to get better on your instrument. Why not do that instead of going out on the street? Having people support you. Then, as I said earlier, playing a group together. It's beautiful what we do. It's incredible. So, and it's definitely saved me, by the way. I
No,
wasn't a knife
and
crime.
me, and me, without a doubt.
I'd be in jail for stealing. I got
Yeah.
arrested a few times for stealing in shops, so, and I didn't engage with school, left at 16, worked in a job that was just horrendous in an office, and then realized I've got to do something I like. You have to remember, people could do that and stay in the job they hate for the rest of their life, which a lot of people do, and make themselves ill, right? So it saved me. And I think it saves a lot of people for their different backgrounds, all kinds of stuff, that people experiences have. But no question. So even if it stops for me now, which I'm not intending for music to stop, this is going to be my next stage.
Mm.
I want to get more. I'm making more and more music. I'm writing so much music. I've got a list of all these great players I can play with. I just need to now get it out there again in the public. All my music, and because it's saving me. It's my self-expression, and so there's nothing better to do in life. So I encourage everyone to play an instrument. It doesn't matter what level either.
But I've got to be honest, Martin. I followed you in the 80s. I haven't followed you more recently because of this. I sat down, put the headphones on, and put some of your new stuff on, and I was going, "I love this. This is brilliant stuff." It was and one of the things you're exploring, which there's quite a bit of modality in there as well as the stand. It's not
Well,
the
that must be
normal thing.
Cherkasy, the Indian Arab inspired music. I
Yeah, and see,
love that.
I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in it as well. That's the sort of thing I like. But I thought you're doing great stuff. My audience loves great stuff. The world's changing, and we artists have to move that they can develop a very small but loyal following that are supporting them, not just supporting them in terms of their music, but it also is supporting them in terms of their aesthetic view of the world and their ethical and moral view of the world. I think that's very important. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping at the end of this video that the people who've stuck here at 3 hours, this is the incredible longest video I've ever done. This is,
Wow.
yeah.
I've got a lot more to say.
Yeah, you're coming. I think you're gonna become a regular if you're up for it, because I
Of course,
think
yeah.
I think I want to be a part of you opening up this new life for you, which is using my platform because your music is exactly the sort of stuff my
Oh, that's so
like.
nice of you.
The story's very interesting. I'm hoping they're all clicking on your crowdfunder now to keep you going, and I'm going to have a chat to you about setting your Patreon up and getting
Oh,
yourself
amazing.
online and start to and drawing people in. Um, I think that's very important, and I'm hoping that this will be a new chapter for you. The
Thank you.
thing that is the biggest crime at the end of this is not what's been done to you. Now we've had the long conversation. Trinity Laban has lost a lecturer that has had over 40 years playing jazz at a high level and teaching jazz. And the knowledge you've got about jazz education is that has been cooked and they've thrown it away.
Yeah, that's a
They
very
have
good point.
thrown it
I
away.
have,
And
yeah,
you know what happens when that happens? They'll bring that 24-year-old in because the money's going and blah, blah, blah. And they will offer it to that person. I've seen it every single time. And but it's like every college where this happens and you kick them out, the people they bring in afterwards, ex-students, because the reason they bring ex-students in is because they can blackmail them more. They can say, we'll offer you a job. And they're
that's
not at the,
exactly what, Andy, that's exactly what's happened at Trinity Laban. Two students, good players actually, two students in their last year, okay, did their finals. Great, I marked one of their finals. You'll know who they are. And the next year, immediately, they get a job teaching there. I mean,
they're
I
eating
taught
their
in,
own
Andy,
arse.
I taught in schools peripatetic for 10 years. I do think people should do other things before they immediately go up into the conservatoire level
They
of
should
teaching.
play. They got
Yeah,
to get out and
they're
play.
playing these guys, but you know, at the age of 23, immediately go when somebody else, 45-year-old, goes to the head of jazz. Are there any piano jobs going? No, there are not. And then gives the job to the 23-year-old. There's an agenda there. You will see. You just look it up. There's an agenda. So that's going on.
There's a thing in jazz that once you get out and play it for real, and I haven't actually played that much jazz, but I've played it all my life, and I've always, I'd take a jazz gig for any money. You do it for the love. You just, and that's my favorite gig to go out and play jazz. But I'm not experienced as a jazz musician. I was experienced as like a rock musician, progressive rock musician. And I did drum clinics and I did a lot of technical stuff. All my experience when I teach comes from those real life experiences that I would go, yeah, this is great, great, great. I don't know that so much with jazz, but I've had certain experiences with jazz. And one of the things that I have noticed is how much better you play when you play with someone better than yourself.
Oh, that's the whole thing. You've got the
And,
whole crux of it.
yeah. And the
So
thing
my
is,
bands, I'm just going to say like particularly quartet. I'm just, yeah, all these people are better than me. I want to play with better people. This is the
yeah.
whole thing. Search out the better people, and you get better.
It's
And
like
it's stimulating all the time.
the great British jazz guitarist Jim Mullen. When I launched my studio, I rang him up and said, "Will you come up and play in my
I watched
studio?"
it. I
And so
watched it.
Jim comes up. I hadn't played jazz for ages. My chops were wrecked. So I mean, dropped the stick at one point, and I was panicking about it. But I got to be honest, because Jim was so good, he pulled me through, and I felt him pulling me through because he
Yeah,
wasn't
strong.
fighting me; he was
Strong.
supporting me.
Yeah,
It's this
brilliant.
thing about love. He wasn't there to beat me up. He wasn't there to prove he was the best.
Yeah,
He was such and especially Jim. And I was listening, thinking he's just not going wrong. And the reason is because he was so empathetic to what I was doing that whatever pile of crap I started off with, he lined up with, and then sort of went, "Whoa," and then I was going, oh yeah, yeah, got to swing a bit more. Oh yeah, don't and I can feel it. He pulled me through, and I believe that if you could only know you like your rock pentatonic and have some blues licks, but you get with some good jazz players, they support you, and you will learn how to make that work. And I feel that when you've got a college environment, they're all sort of working within their own realm, but when you're playing Ronnie Scott and you got Betty Carter on, like, or Horace Silver, I bet when you stood up to play, you're thinking, well, Horace Silver's watching. You can't not think. You know what I'm saying? We've all been
Yeah.
there. We've all been there. And so I just think that the education system is eating its own arse. And the reason why they pull these people back in is because they know that they're so desperate for the job that they will kowtow to the rules, and because they're young, they will kowtow to the rules. Because it's like we are just a bunch of old blokes to them. We've got these antiquated values about
Well, there's different.
tolerance and colour blindness.
Yeah, there is that. And Trinity Laban, I have to say, does have people of all kind of generations teaching there. But there is truth in what you're saying. But all the generations are yes people now, as far as I'm concerned. I'm quite different. It seems, aren't I? I mean, no one
No, you
stepped
are.
up.
Yeah, you
I'm
are.
tough.
I mean,
I'm not
yeah.
blowing my own trumpet. I seem to be quite different. Like why are not a lot of people saying, "Yeah, I totally agree with it." At Trinity Laban, why are they not doing that?
But I know other people where this has happened to them, and it's really badly affected them mentally. I don't think it's going to affect you like that
Oh, I'm
because I think,
fine.
yeah,
I've been liberated. I'm
I
liberated.
love it. I love it. You're going to be all right, Martin. You know you are going to
Yeah.
be all right.
Well,
It's
it's people like you who give me a platform. You're very obviously supportive. Going for walks with friends. I feel great. It's reaffirmed. It's renewed my faith in humanity because at one stage I thought, my God, everyone's against me. Literally everyone, and everyone else is too scared to say anything who is not against me. But if you look at my crowdfunder, the comments are very moving. I can cry with some of those comments because they're so supportive. And this is what you touched on earlier. These are just ordinary people on the street.
mm,
That's who's writing on there. They can see they're incensed by it. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. So I really feel galvanized in a lot of ways by talking to you. It's amazing you give me this opportunity because, as I say, it fitting into GB News and Talk TV, which is a great platform because it gets to a lot of people. Maybe not even as many as yours, but they don't give me enough time. I'm cut off halfway through the story. You've pretty much got the story now, I think, earlier on
yeah.
in
Do
that
you feel that?
discussion.
'Cause I was a bit worried because I was chatting so much through it, but the
Yeah.
audience have to understand that by giving you a platform, I am now lining up with you. And if I'm going to line up with you, I am going to say my opinion. And I believe that you don't fanny around with these people. You say it straight. They are the racists, not us. Right? Now, we could be totally wrong. Educate us with some facts and some reasoned arguments. And I always shift my position when I lose the argument. I promise you, my mum and dad brought me up to be like that. Right. This is why I'm at the place I am. I didn't have these opinions 10 years ago. I was all liberal and thought this stuff was really useful and stopped racism, but it doesn't. It
Andy,
absolutely
it,
doesn't. It makes it
it's
worse.
I'm not going to say these people are racist. It might come across they are actually in the end, but it's more that in the institutions, oh, right, what do we do this year? Oh, no, this is the line we take this year. We've been told this from above. To keep my job, I'm going to do BLM diversity for a few years. That's how that handful, by the way, we're talking about a handful of people at the top here. That's how they're thinking. And this is going to pervade through the whole institution, and everyone else is going to go in line with it or ignore it. That's the other thing. Probably a load of people don't agree with it, but they're just ignoring it. As people said to you earlier, why did he press the button and respond? That's the good question. Yeah, why did I do that? Because I had to speak my truth,
You
but
have
I
to
had to
speak your
speak
truth.
to them.
That's it. You should be allowed to do that, and you should be allowed to get it completely wrong, and them to go,
Yeah,
Martin, you don't understand, and then you go, it's this and this and this, and then you go,
exactly.
oh yeah, that's true. I can see that, and that
Maybe
is
I'm
how,
missing
if they
something.
were right, they would arrive at getting everyone on side, but they aren't right. That's the bottom line. I have studied the philosophy of this in depth, and they're not right because I haven't gone into it here, but there is really deep philosophical problems. I wouldn't say philosophical problems, but just things that you have to take on board almost like dogmatically. So you have to believe there's an essence of racism. You have to believe that racism isn't an individual thing, that it's systemic. And it's not systemic in the rules, it's systemic in sort of the ether. You have
Yes.
to believe that white people have a fundamental stain of being racist, and that they
Yeah.
the anti-racist thing is that if you're not actively being anti-racist, then you're still being racist. You have to believe these ideas, and nobody can really believe these unless they've been indoctrinated with a whole bunch of
Yeah.
stupid stuff. Now,
Yeah.
the thing is that if they go, right, we want it to be 50% black and 50% white. And so when we do the things, we will
That's
tick
going to
the
be
boxes. Now they're not that far away from this. When they tick those boxes and they bring the musicians in based upon their race, which is the only answer that your boss could, that's the only thing that you could do to please what your boss was asking you to do. What else are you supposed to do? Just walk around going, yeah, racism's bad. What you're supposed to do is by favouring people based upon the colour of their skin. When those people are then in the university, everybody knows why they're there. They're there because of the colour of their skin.
Well, I'm not going to say that because I don't know, because I didn't do the auditions. Interestingly, they didn't get me in to do the auditions over the last few years because I used to do auditions.
Mm.
So I can't say.
I'm not saying they've done that. I'm saying this.
Andy, I'm
Yeah,
not.
I'm
I
not
just want
saying
to
they've done
make.
that.
I
I'm
want
not
to
sa-
make certain what you know, what I think, and what
yeah.
your listeners. In my email, I don't say people have got into that college because they're black.
No,
Okay.
I didn't say that either.
What I'm saying is, Trinity Laban used the jazz course for their quotas, i.e., because there's going to be more black people applying to do the jazz course than the classical course. That's just what's going on. I don't know whether they got in because they're black or they're not. I don't care about that. I wasn't doing the auditions. So I just think they need the jazz course, which is why we're in all of our students. I'll bring that up again. They're saying they need the jazz course for that issue because visibly you can see, oh, we can put a few of these black students on posters, which is what they've done over the last few years. And that was part of my email. I said, look, Trinity Laban's uh, publicity here is not representative of the student body. You've got 90% or 100% black kids in your publicity. And then I linked the London Jazz Festival of the previous year, not last year, the year, and it's pretty much 90% black in the publicity.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what, and they're the things I'm saying, not that people are
But
doing
their
what
argument was we want to reach more black people. Andy's just been saying they don't apply because they don't know about Laban. If they see some black faces, then they're going to apply because they know it's a safe place for black people to apply. That's going to be their argument
Oh
there.
yeah, no, that's well, hold on. This I can't stand this terminology, safe place or
Yeah.
safe for anyone. Is my life safe? You
Mm.
know, what is this? That's immediately putting people in victim mode
Yeah, of course it
constantly.
is. Yeah.
And people don't need to be in victim mode. It's ridiculous. I know
But
people want
but
to use it for their careers, but it's not going to do them any good psychologically in the end. If
what
they're
what
in that
happened with
mode.
what happened with the BLM thing is that a lot of companies and establishments they had their boss had to email out and say we're going to open this up to everybody. Has anybody got any ideas of what we could do to get to bring more black people into this whatever it is, blah blah blah. And what you're supposed to do then is you're supposed to get an article on anti-racism and you email it back and say this is a really good article, and they go yes, well that's a really good article. We'll circulate that. That is what you're supposed to do there. Nothing else. That is all
Right.
you're supposed to do. And then they go, have we done the have we made the staff aware of our racist policy? Yes. Have you got them? Yes. And did anyone answer back? Yes, 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 and yes. That is what is supposed to happen there. But no one actually wants you to do anything about it.
No.
Because if you were to do something about it, if they were to say, right, you want to get more black people into the college, what are you going to do that? What are you actually going to do? Now you've got two choices. You either try and make your audition process as colorblind as possible so the best people get in. Now I would argue you don't necessarily need the best people in the college, right? I would actually be slightly left wing and say if somebody's coming from an underprivileged background, maybe we could favor them a little bit more if they're exactly the same level, right? But it gets very difficult. My answer would be trust the teachers to go on their gut reaction. This is my really contentious thing. I believe that if you've got a teacher that's experienced in terms of marking, in terms of auditioning, everything, just go on their gut reaction. Because the amount of times I've sat there and I've thought, this course is going to really benefit this person because that's fundamentally what it should be.
You know
Not
another thing.
race, not it
Yeah.
should be. This is going to
Andy,
really benefit this person.
you know that's very good. So when I did do all the auditions, the head of jazz, doing the head of jazz, and I enjoyed doing them. You know, we talked about, does this person fit into the course? You know, in a
Yeah.
community way. That's a really important thing as well. You know, because there were some people who were probably good who maybe didn't get it, white or black, whatever, you know, because you could see their vibe was not right for the course. It was just all about them, and you could see they might be a bit above the course and not hang out with it. You know, there were those things, considerations as well. It wasn't only can this person play, and that was valid. I thought that was good. You know, the idea of creating a community as a really good aesthetic. However, I don't think that's happened. You know, I'm supposedly part of this community and I'm not allowed to say these horrendous things. You know,
No, but
it's a
my point
joke.
is that you either act in a if see if you said I actually don't think that the jazz world that there's a that their people aren't being able to access it because of their color of their skin. He could have said that's a very good point. We need to push that. We need to show that actually the jazz world in the UK is somewhere where black people have really achieved, and look what they've achieved, and they've done that on their own merit. If he'd have answered it like that, he could have actually said this is a really positive thing, but they won't because it's not the ideology. It's not the ideology to read out all those people with OBEs. And like I said at the time, they all deserve those OBEs. Isn't it an incredible thing? Black people are more representative jazz because jazz, it's probably got us think about it enabled. But for them to turn around and go, this can't be the case. It can't be the case that black is ridiculous. The whole thing is not logical, and you've had to
No,
lose your
it's no
job over
logic.
it. I mean, this is. I mean, I think we've got to get to the end here, but we are at the crux of it, which is the audition process. That's really from the educational point of view, it comes down to that audition process. And I'll let the audience decide whether you just have a blanket, right? Just it's based upon how good you are. I don't think that's the answer. Whether they fit in, gut reaction, their race or an ethnicity, which one you think is the best one to go, maybe the answer is that 10% is based upon race. Maybe when all the other factors are the same, you've got two people and you've ticked every single one off and you're left with the last factor, you go, well, let's give it to the black kid. But when I say that, it sounds racist to say that, to make a decision based upon that. I'd be saying, look, let's just get some more bloody funding and have both of them. Jesus Christ, because that's the real problem. Get some more teachers in, some more rooms. If there's more people that want to come on it, the whole thing's just rotten. You're better off out, I tell you.
I think I am. Unfortunately, I think I am. And it has changed over the years. You know,
Yeah,
as I said before, fees, it was a great environment. And, you know, people running the courses now are certain kinds of people who want to toe the line. They're not, they're not mavericks. You know, Graham Collier set up the jazz course in the Royal Academy of Music at the end of the 80s. Very impressive guy. And he, even then, those days, right, he found out on a piano not to be used by jazz students. And he went in completely steamed into the classical department. What do you mean by this? Is outrageous because, of course, classical music, I have to say, there's more dynamics. The piano's going to get trashed a lot more in classical music than in
yeah.
jazz. You know. So anyway, so he went in. He's really fighting the corner for the course. You know, and he was a very beautiful guy, actually. You know, and he passed away, but when he finished teaching there, he put me up for the job. He said, I really want you to carry on the job after. I couldn't believe it. He said this because it's quite a while ago now, 20, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. So I went for it. And of course, I'm not the yes person, you know. There's no way I was going to get the job. That's a whole other story. And of course, I'm definitely not the right person for any head of a course. I'm not going to toe any of these lines, you know. And now, that's what I'm saying. The people in the heads of the courses, they've got to go along with everything. They really have. All the three conservatoires I teach at, I can see that. That's why they're all against me, because that's the agenda. But we need to be against him. We need to be pro students. 18-year-olds can decide my career. This is my whole point. I've mentioned in a couple of interviews. And I'll just say this. Go back to the story. On one hand, the students are too anxious, right? They're anxious. So they're like children. We treat them like children because they say they're anxious. On the other hand, we treat them like adults so they can make adult decisions on my life. And that's it. That's what's going on. And so the student must be totally confused. Am I an adult or a child? And of course, they're in between, aren't they? At the age of 18 to 20, to 21. Because the brain, the frontal cortex, does not come fully into play at 25 when you see consequences of your actions, which is why there's a lot of car accidents with young males driving and females sometimes. But, you know, because the frontal cortex has not caught up, and you probably know this, it's not caught up with, well, we're just going to have a good laugh in the car and you're going to drive really fast. You know, so they are not mature enough. As much as I love all those students, they are not mature enough to make these decisions on my life, which they've done. I say the students, it's Trinity they're telling the students how to behave.
When I used to teach, and the kids came in the first day, and I go, right, we're going to do this piece of music, or we're going to do this. And I used to do a jazz show every year. And that's basically was the mechanism I got to get my students good, is that they did all their cover versions. They played some Oasis songs, and then they did a jazz show. Now, some of this was just basic blues, and it was, you know, like Fine and Mellow was one of the tunes I used to do because, you know, singers could sing it. Yeah, Billie Holiday, wonderful stuff. You could express yourself, all that stuff. And they used to hate it. And they used to go, I don't like this music. I don't like this music. And I'd turn around to them and I'd say, I don't care what you like.
Good.
And then I'd go, nobody cares what you like. And they'd look at me shocked. And they go, well, but what about our opinion? I said, do you want to be a musician? Yeah. You're going to work in the industry? Yeah. I said, well, you're going to have to earn that, because when you go into it, nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares. And I was chatting to a very famous session musician that's been at the top, like, you know, the top of top. And I said, have you got any advice about being a session musician? He says, yeah. He says, when the boss asks your opinion, you don't give it ever. Don't give, even if it's positive, don't give it. And I turned around and said, this is why I'm not a session musician. Yeah, exactly. And you're the same, because if you got that gig, you know, backing up Whitney Houston or whoever it was in the section, even just going, if she or the MD says, we're going to change it to this, you said, oh yeah, I can see that's a good idea. What's your thinking there? You're sacked just by saying that. And so I would turn around to the students and say, I just go, nobody cares. You're booked to do the job. You're booked to do the job. Now, jazz isn't like that. They do care in jazz, but all the other music forms, shut up. Who cares what you think about this? I don't need to know whether you like it or not. And they were so shocked when I said it, and I knew I was right. But the trouble is that as time went on, me making these points to the students was seen as somehow I'm an old man. I was saying this when I was younger, you know, but it got perceived in a certain way. The other one that used to really freak them out, I used to turn around and say, do you know that half the population is below average intelligence? And they go, that can't be true. And I go, it is true. And they goes, what's your facts? What's your facts? I said, you don't need facts. I said, it's logically true. They said, it can't be true. I said, it logically is. You've got a population. If you draw a line down the middle of intelligence, you don't even have to define intelligence. Don't have to define it. Whatever it is, half the population will be below average. It has to be mathematically. It's an a priori statement. They couldn't deal with an a priori statement because they believe that everything's culturally constructed and everything has to have this. So when you talk of intelligence, there's a construction around intelligence, and you cannot say that half the population is thick.
Oh my God, this is so interesting. I've just read the book by Lionel Shriver called Mania. Who's a fantastic writer and actually supporter with me. Don't know whether you know her, quite a famous writer. Okay, she's famous for doing the book We Need to Talk About Kevin, which became a film with I don't know who was in it, but Tilda Swinton, big Hollywood film. Anyway, she's supportive. She's actually the wife of Jeff Williams, the drummer, American drummer, who I mentioned earlier. But her book I think it's Mania, it's called, is about kind of related to what you just said, where everything, I said to her, Lionel, I'm living your book, but it wasn't a subject of race, it's a subject of mediocrity. Like, you can't have anyone really intelligent or really thick. Everyone has got to be mediocre, okay? And this teacher in the book it's worth reading, but it's incredible, is speaking out about this. This is ridiculous. No, some of your work is crap, and that work is brilliant by the students. You know, it's amazing. And of course, she gets cancelled. Everything the same as me, but on a different issue. So things like, and of course, there's book burning in a way. The book The Idiot by Dostoevsky is banned. You can't say idiot, you can't say stupid, you can't say this, that, and the other. So that's what you just sort of triggered me.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, it's not anyone who wants to have a go at me, and they will when you say it. But actually, what I said has to be the case. It can't not be the case. It's an a priori. You don't
I
have
think
to
it's
go
probably
out to
more
him.
than half.
No, it's not. It is half because of maths. It's
Okay.
just half. It
No,
has
but
to
what
be
I'm
half.
saying, hold on,
Is that
what I'm saying is though, unfortunately believe people are getting stupider.
But even
Yeah,
if they get stupider and the whole is more stupid than it was before, relatively, it will still be only half the population is below average
I
intelligence.
don't think I agree with you because
No, so you're doing it. You see, it
I
has
think
to
some
be
people are going to get more intelligent
right.
now.
If you've got like if you had like a case of numbers,
Yeah,
right, and you just say how many of those numbers will be below the average number. So if you added all those numbers up and then got an average number of what those numbers are, all different numbers, no matter what the numbers are, how many will be? Exactly half will be below average. Because if you've got any measured thing, it will always be the case that
I
that's
see what you
half
mean.
will
I
be
see how
below
you're getting.
average.
I see
And the
what you're getting
reason
at.
why we don't cognitively understand that is because we've all been tainted by this ideology that goes, well, you can't say that.
Yeah,
Or
yeah. No, that's
intelligence,
not
I
my
don't even have to
reason.
define intelligence.
That's not my reason, but I get what you're saying now.
You see, I'm saying mathematically,
Yeah, yeah,
however you draw the line,
yeah,
and the fact that people have an emotional response to that basic it's not even an empirical fact, it's an a
yeah.
priori fact.
I see what you mean.
You see what I mean? It's like I think, therefore I am. And then
Yeah,
somebody goes, "Oh, I don't think that." Well, it is the case. That is the case.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
one of these a priori statements. But the one I just said is even more. You don't have to test it. And if someone says, "Well, what do you mean by intelligence?" Doesn't matter. As long as we have the idea that there is a thing called intelligence and the fact that it has a quality aspect to it,
yeah. I
other
understand
people,
what you're saying there.
yeah,
Hey, I have to say,
it's interesting, isn't it?
very interesting. Yeah,
But
how you
I've
put it.
studied the philosophy of it for like 40 years now, and so I know where the Achilles heel is in this ideology. I know where it is.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're
and
more on the case than me with actual studying and the statistics and all that. Mine's much more intuitive how I feel about all this.
Yeah, well, I work very closely with like they're called English philosophers, and that's not a racist term. English philosophy just really deals in with what is true or false, and it doesn't go into like metaphysical discussions. It doesn't believe you can do that. Whereas the postmodernists are complete opposite. And that tussle that's going on in philosophy has gone through the 20th century, and it's that tussle that we're actually experiencing now. Now, I believe you have a perfect right to go on either one. You can go on either ones if you want. There's no problem, but nobody should be castigated for not wanting to believe the neo-Marxist postmodernist version of how the world works. You have a perfect right to not accept that.
Yeah.
You see, and our mate Sean Corby went to court and fought this, and the fact is, it's now enshrined in law.
Well, that's right. So we're using Sean's my solicitors will be using Sean's case because it's a
So
precedent.
let's thank Sean. Let's
Yeah,
thank
thank you
Sean for
very
what
much,
he's done,
Sean.
because I know it's taking it out of him so much.
Yeah.
I think we're at 3.5 hours here.
Oh, we just started. We've only just begun.
Martin, you've broke the record. This is pretty incredible. It's all going
Wow.
up. This, I mean, I'm going to have to say in the notes, this is like the Iliad of YouTube videos. They're going to have to spend a week. I wonder how many of you are still here at the end of this video here, 3.5 hours in. If you're still here, you're hardcore Martin Speak fans now. So get on over and do his crowdfunder. Get in touch with him. Send him a message to support him because this is what he needs now. He needs to reach out. This is what you need to do. Reach out and get people that are into your music, but also into the cause. And you need to combine the cause with your music.
I think
Yeah, you have to
it's so
fight for
right.
your freedom of expression because you believe in it, and I'll back you up 100%.
Thanks so much, Andy. I mean, and also maybe people could go to my YouTube channel just to hear my music because there's loads of
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm going to get you. I want you on because I wanted a jazz musician that can deal have discussions about this ideology that's out there at the moment. I've got quite a few people, and there's other guys like I'd really like to sit you down with Ben McInnes, who's a documentary filmmaker, American jazz drummer, brilliant drummer, but he's done a number of jazz documentaries and he has a very intelligent take on it. I've got a whole bunch of academics that will back you up. The like doctors of philosophy, they've
Oh
all been on the
wow,
channel.
great.
Yeah, if you want me to send you some links, I
Yeah,
will,
do.
because
Is
and
it?
it'd be lovely to get you to sit down with certain, because every single intelligent philosopher that I've spoken to have gone, well, of course, you're totally right about identity, and then they've tuned me in. But nobody who knows what they're talking about would believe any of this crap. It's only an artsy fartsy musician that's a head of a department at Trinity Laban would believe such a nonsense.
I think
They're
probably people
idiots.
don't even believe it. I think some
Yeah,
people
you're
don't
right.
believe it and they're just doing it for their job.
So everyone, click out the links, check Martin Speak out, do everything you've got to do, support him, message him, and also message him and say I'm behind you. He needs people. He needs the more people he knows is behind him, the more he's going to be able to fight through this. And I want Martin to find this new career where he's got his Patreon funding. I'm going to help you do it. It's a much better way of doing it. Get yourself out and find some venues that want to get you to play, all that type of stuff. And like there's enough people out there going, no, I don't want this shit around me. I'm buying. That's what the venue should have done. They shouldn't have turned you down. They go, I'm going to put you on. I've booked you. If nobody turns up, I'm going to stand by you. But they just wouldn't do it. Not because they didn't agree with you, but because they're cowards. They're cowards. All bloody cowards. Like the video, subscribe. Oh, it doesn't matter. No one's watching at this point. Shall we say goodbye to
Yeah,
them?
it's amazing, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm glad you appreciate it. If I can just get my finger on, because I always have to end in a little bit of like a play school end.